Stage one of the Colorado Classic here on GCN Racing. We are in Steamboat Springs today at just 85.8 kilometers in length. It is a hilly one. Danny Rowe is with me again to take us through this one. Danny, exciting Colorado Classic last year. I was here with Dan. We did the men's race. The women's race was there. We didn't see much of it. They decided to dispense with the men's race. Concentrate on the women's race.
Yeah, I think that's amazing for women's cycling. We're seeing such an increase now in the participation of women's cycling, but really the increase in the strength and depth of women's racing. And it's great to see so much more coverage for the women's racing and, races and riders really, taking a hold of these prestigious races. So I think this Tour of Colorado will be amazing. It's a race I've never actually ridden myself, but I'm really looking forward to commentating on.
When we're looking now at the US season as well, and for us, and as well as you for viewers, we're seeing potentially for a lot of the time, we're seeing a completely new peloton because we've got a lot of domestic teams here as well that we are seeing for the first time, which is really exciting. So we'll get used to those over the course of the 4 days as well. But then that also means that it gives those riders who are coming through from a sort of a domestic US program. We have got Canyon SRAM, we've got B Pink, those sort of teams in here. Kogas have come across as well. But it gives those riders the opportunity to kind of put themselves in the shop window of someone like Canyon SRAM.
Yeah, it's a really good opportunity, like you say, for those riders. Racing in America is very different to Europe, and I think we'll get onto that a little bit more later. But like you say, a really great opportunity for riders to show themselves in front of some of the bigger teams, and also riders that come from the collegiate scene in the USA. That's really big in America, to really get involved in the UCI racing, a little bit of a different format. So I think we'll see some really aggressive racing here. It was super aggressive last year with Katie Hall taking the overall, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Now, as you said, Katie Hall took the general classification last year, but the stages, they were pretty short. They're kind of, double and then some this year as well, which again is another good thing to see.
Yeah, I think it's a really good advancement on last year. We see that quite a lot in races, actually, where they'll start as shorter races, then they'll lengthen the stages, and then also the stage in total. So now we have 4 days of racing along with different terrain, so flatter stages, some super hilly stages, an up and down stage, which we can see today, and tomorrow just one brutal climb. Also a bit of gravel thrown in there today, so yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the gravel more and more. We got about 10 kilometres of gravel today. So again, it's one of those stages that could be completely open for anyone. But we're seeing the gravel coming in more and more, aren't we? We're seeing, we had it in the Volgada, race last week as well. We had the gravel sections in that. But we've got the map. We can show you what the riders have ahead of them today. So out of Steamboat Springs, and then we head into the hills. So we've got an intermediate sprint. So that will come at 33 kilometres. So we've got the first QOM, which comes at 35.7 kilometres. The second one with just 16.9 to go. So as we said, it's an odd stage. It could be one for the climbers if they manage to get away, but then the sprinters that can hang on, maybe a gravel rider, someone like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. I think riders and teams will have a plan A and plan B. I think those teams without pure sprinters will try and make it really aggressive over the climbs, but then the ones with the sprinters will be hanging on, I'm sure, for grim death over the sections and try and get in a great position through the gravel, because that's where you can see different things like crashes happen, and with it being so close to the finish, that could also have an impact on the race.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing as you said, the Volgada race in Sweden last week. We're seeing the gravel more and more, and we're seeing the real growth of gravel racing as well, aren't we? And it's kind of, for me, it's all, we're getting news that they might put a gravel mountain time trial into the Giro d'Italia next year, but gravel racing as well, and adding that gravel in, it's a new skill for riders. It sort of it really suits those cyclocross riders. But gravel, it's almost like, competition surfers and soul surfers and that kind of thing. We've got that kind of sort of mix now, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting because stage race riders really have to be able to do everything. They have to be able to time trial, climb, get through the sprint stages in one piece, and now they've got gravel thrown in the mix. So you really have to be an all-rounder to be able to complete these stage races. And again, like you say, with Strade Bianche, Sweden having big gravel sections, it's super important to be able to be versatile as a bike rider. And I think that's why you're seeing so many cyclocross riders come in to be super road racers.
Now we've got pictures. The riders are down on the start. We do have to say that because you can see the mountains here, the picture, and we've been warned by the host broadcaster, that's nothing to do with us. So the host broadcaster, as we roll away from the start here, has let us know that there's going to be sections of this course where we have blackouts, and then they'll come back, and then we'll drop out again, then we'll have the running. So we'll have the rollout here. You can see we're 85.6 kilometers to go. We'll then head into the hills. We might get the 2 Queen of the Mountains points on the top of the hills before we get a blackout again, and then they'll come back. So please bear with us on that. Nothing that we can do here as GCN Racing. We will do our best. We'll also do our best to entertain you in those sections where we're out. You can join in on the comment sections on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter. So we have the hashtag #AskDanny. You have Olympic champion and world champion here in Danny Rose. You can ask her any questions that you want. We'll have a little Q&A session in between. We've got some videos lined up, some GCN videos as well. So if and when that happens, we're pretty sure that it's going to, please do bear with us, stay with us, and just keep kind of, you know, we'll jump back in, but we will do our best to keep you entertained, as they say. So rolling out Katie Hall. She's here as part of the US national team. You can see her there.
Yeah, you could see her there with her orange Boels Dolmans helmet in the middle. It's a bit of a split racing programme at the moment, because earlier today myself and Marty were commentating on the first stage of Tour of Norway. So Canyon SRAM are also riding that race, but they've got a really great team here, Canyon, and then also Boels Dolmans aren't here, but they obviously have Katie Hall for their team, and she's riding for the US national team here, and you can see her in the middle of your screens there in the orange helmet. She won this race last year, so I'm sure she'll be out there to try and do the same again in 2019.
She's an exciting rider, is Katie Hall, and what a climber as well. I mean, I think when you come into a race like this, and you've got Katie Hall in here, and we've seen her this year moving across after the demise of the UHC team, United Healthcare team, moving into Boels Dolmans. I think there's so many people that were so excited just to see her in Boels Dolmans and seeing her more in the Giro Rosa and that sort of race, being able to just see her climbing ability.
Yeah, definitely, and she did a fantastic job in the Giro Rosa. But this is where I think she really loves racing in the USA. She loved racing at the Tour of California. She's won stages there before. She's obviously won this race before. She's been present in the Tour of the Gila as well. So, you know, she's really home. She'll have so much support out there on the road. So she's definitely got to be the favourite for this race. Again, a lot of climbing, over 1,000 metres of elevation on today's stage, although it's very up and down. There's no massive significant climb on this first stage today, but tomorrow it looks like there's a climb of around 10 kilometres. So I'm sure Katie Hall will be rubbing her hands together, looking forward very much so to tomorrow's stage, where she can hopefully put a lot of time into her rivals.
So we've got to look as well. We'll give you a rundown of your teams that you can see here. We've got Hagen's Berman Supermint, you can see on the front there in the mint green colours and blue jerseys. So we've got ALP Cycles Racing, and watch out there in navy blue and pink, and Aisha McGowan, a rider that we've been tipped to watch out for in this one. Canyon SRAM, you can see the Canyon SRAM jerseys there, the black with the multiple colours. Canyon SRAM really, as a team coming into this one, as you said, split program. They're over in Tour of Norway as well. They're kind of the team up there to be kind of shot at, if you like. It's almost their race to lose, this one.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think it's really up to them to control this race. You know, they are definitely the biggest team in this race. They've got a lot of American sponsors, so that's why they'll definitely be, you know, present here, wanting to come away with the win. They've got Tiffany Cromwell in the Canyon SRAM team, who is a super experienced domestique, and I personally think they'll be going for Omer Shapira, who is the Israeli two-time national champion on the road. She's a super climber. She did really well in the Giro. And then Tanya Erath, who is a really good sprinter in her own right, only actually coming into the World Tour peloton in the last couple of years. So, like you say, they're going to have to control this race. The teams will be looking out for them, I'm sure, and the USA national team to really take this into their own hands.
So, also in the peloton, Durango Specialized with watch out for Veronica Leal, a 4-time national time trial champion of Colombia and 2-time national road champion. Olga Zabelinskaya and the Kogas Metier team, the team in red here on the front.
Yeah, that's Zabelinskaya there on the front of the peloton, and she's known for being so super strong, and she'll just ride there all day. I think we'll see a lot of her. She's got that really nice riding style, very still upper body, getting all the power through the pedals. Yeah, she's had some really big results throughout her cycling career, and I'm sure she'll be trying again for this race.
And they've also got Amber Neben, who's just behind her, and Amber Neben, the American rider, and Amber, of course, twice world's time trial champion. So she's wearing the red colours. This is the there's Omar Shapira there in the national champions jersey of Israel. So she's coming through towards the front.
Yeah, Amber Neben's a really interesting rider because you always think she's stopped racing and then she comes back and she's in such fine form, and at 44 years old she's so experienced, she'll know exactly what training she needs to do to get herself back into that top shape. And obviously being American means, I'm sure, you know, she'll step straight into this racing straight away. Talking
of riders that are, you know, fairly inspirational, you could say, Edward Patel is the other rider in there, and she's still racing. She's a French rider. She's 52.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Edward Patel. There's the profile of the stage today. So as you can see there, those are the 2 QOM points. So a lumpy stage, and these are the sort of stages. You can see the total elevation game there, 1,297 metres, 4,255 feet of climbing. We're going to jump between miles and kilometres as well, because the US, like us here in the UK, is also in miles, but we as cyclists are so used to kilometres, and cycling, you know, we generally go. So you can see that the ticker in the top goes between miles and kilometres. 89 riders starting the stage today. Lux, we're seeing those Lux Flex and Shell, is the team in white. They're very much to the front of the race as well. Show Air 2020 are the team. They're also in a dark blue and navy blue jersey, our Show Air 2020. A team that's kind of gone from the 2012 Olympics into the 2016 Olympics and now into the 2020 Olympics. And again, as an American team, it's a team that's done a huge amount of good for American racing. They've got some real talent in there, haven't they?
Yeah, they have, and they do obviously come from a track background with Chloe Dygert and Jennifer Valente in there, who have both ridden Olympic Games. Valente in 2016 in the team pursuit, which I rode obviously in 2012 Olympics.
How did you get on in that one, Danny?
We did okay.
Did you get a gold in that one?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, I know they have a lot of influence from Kristen Armstrong, who has come, you know, she's obviously been multiple world time trial champion, so much experience again on the road, and she's really developing these riders. You could see now 2 of the riders coming up on the right hand side of your screen. I think that is Chloe Dygert, and she's obviously one to watch today if she can get herself over the climb. She is such a classy sprinter, so I think she's my pick if it comes down to a sprint. But again, like you say, a super impressive team that are really developing and have got a lot of stars in there to watch out for the future.
The team you can see there in the bright yellow jerseys, I like that jersey. Again, it's cool kit. Point S Auto Noxian tyres. Caroline Manny, good cyclocross rider is Caroline Manny. She's in there as well. So they've got a good team. Also, there's Emma Grant just on the back there for Show Air 2020. British rider on the American team is Emma Grant.
Yeah, I think she might be the only British rider in this race. So yeah, nice to see a fellow Britain there. She's done a couple of seasons in America now. I think you see a lot of riders going over to America to potentially pick up some bigger results and then try and catch the eye of European teams to then come back over to the Europe to race in the World Tour.
So the rollout here, you can see Olga Zabelinskaya just very much controlling affairs at the front of the peloton. The Rally UHC team, you can see here now, they are in blue jerseys. So and if you're used to seeing Rally UHC this year in orange, they are now in those light blue jerseys, bit of orange on there as well. The white felt bikes. And for Rally UHC, good team as well. They've got Sarah Poidevin in there, the Canadian. I hope I said that right. She has a very French ring to it. Abby Mickey, Krista Dobell-Hickok, Emma White and Alison Beveridge. Rally UHC again, split program, but they've got a strong team. Emma White, very good sprinter. Krista Dobell-Hickok and Abby Mickey, both right. The whole teams we should be watching out for.
Yeah, it does look like a super strong team. Emma White has just come back from the Tour of Scotland, where she picked up second in stage 2 and second in the youth classification. She's only 21 years old, a super strong rider. And then Krista Dobell-Hickok, who I actually rode with in Silence team, a super climber. She was 4th last year overall in this race. And also Alison Beveridge, who is a track rider and again knows how to race on the road, super strong, super fast, coming from the track, having speed in her legs. So for those kind of criterium stages towards the end of the tour, or potentially even this stage, if they do manage to get themselves over this lumpy terrain, they could be great.
Yeah, so we'll just run you through the rest of your teams. Fearless Femme, they are another team. They are in a light blue jersey with orange and blue. There they are. There's the colours of Fearless Femme, right on schedule for us, right on the back here. And the rider, Rebecca Wysack, is the rider there, number 111. She won the opening stage last year, did Rebecca Wysack, and a double world individual pursuit champion, Aussie criterium champion as well as Rebecca Wysack. So someone, do you know what, I think could be a good day for her today again.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, she won the individual pursuit in 2015 and 2016. She's been up there. She won the criterium national champs in Australia before. Really strong sprinter. She normally likes to launch her attack about 1k from the finish. Obviously playing into her strengths as being an individual pursuiter, about that kind of 3-minute effort, you know, just using that pure strength to try and get all the way to the line. She hasn't done much racing this year, so it'll be interesting to see if she's got those sort of race legs back. But again, another rider to watch out for.
Because a lot, again, a bit like yourself, really, when you kind of make that transition from the track to the road full time, is it a tough transition to make?
Yeah, it is really hard. Essentially, they're two different sports. The track is all about the speed, power. There's a lot of strength and endurance emphasis on training, and essentially it's a between 3 and 4 minute event. And the road is now up to, you know, you're seeing races in Europe up to 160 kilometers, you know, 4 to 5 hours of racing. So it really is a different physiology of bike riding. The track is not really about power to weight like the road is. You know, these stages, in particularly tomorrow, there'll be such an emphasis on power to weight. Obviously you need the strength, but it will suit the lighter riders who can ride at a really high watts per kilo of body weight, whereas the track it's just such a sprint endurance event. So you have to, it took me a few years. I transitioned from the track to the road at the end of 2014, and I didn't really make massive gains until a couple of years later, when I had those kilometers in my legs and had the chance to really race and learn how to race on the road as well.
Just seeing the DNA team come up towards the front. So the DNA Pro Cycling. So Heather Fisher, Hannah Shield, Melanie Beale, Amy Charity Brenner, Rye Simpson and Kimberly Lucy. Good to see them up. The Oak Creek Sprint. So if you see these things on the screen, so they're trying to break a record for a preem here on the Colorado Classic. So they're right on the rollout. Just see 82.8 to go. Olga Zabelinskaya here really has kind of got everything under control. Thanks for all your input already over on our GCN Racing channel on YouTube. Thanks for checking in. Daniel Otero from Boston. Sam Lang. Who do we think is going to win the stage? We're going to throw each other under the bus already. I've just said Rebecca Wysack. I've gone for Rebecca Wysack.
Wow. Ooh, this is a tough one. Do you know what? I'm going to go for Chloe Dygert.
Oh, there we go. It's going to get over these climbs, the gravel sections. We've got all of that. Artur's Alexeyevs from Latvia. Thanks for saying hi, Arthur. There's a few of you. Arthur Gooseby going for Tiffany Cromwell. Al Sher is Alicia McGowan in the race? Yes, she is. A lot of excitement around her. Gemma Lynn. She's riding in the Alp Cycles dark blue jersey with the pink stripe. Yes, she is. So watch out for that team. And again, if as I've said, we are Danny and I will hold our hands up. You know, we're around the world peloton a lot, but a lot of the American teams, a lot of the domestic American riders, we're seeing for the first time. So if you've got, I know on GCN and good platforms you go out for, if you know the riders, you're related to the riders, you want to give us some background info and a little bit of information, feel free to send that in. Onto the Oak Creek Sprint here, and we're going in. This is the Mexican Swap It team that are going on the attack here. We'll say that Annette Barrera is the rider that we should be watching out for in particular from this one, the national champion. But they're going into this sprint. Our Swap It's a Jolico. So that, again, you can see just really going on the attack. The two riders from this team.
You could see Canyon Schramm quickly trying to close this gap down behind. Like I said, they really do need to control this race as the biggest, team out here today in the Colorado Classic Stage 1. So I'm sure they won't just let these two riders from the same team ride away ahead of this first sprint.
So just a good move here early on. So Olga Zablinskaya, Emma Grant still on the back of the group here. So this move just getting themselves established off the front. So good gap for the two riders here from Swap It from Mexico. So we've got quite a few. This is one of our other teams. Good to see them getting themselves off the front here. So we've also got the Durango Specialized team in here. So this is Angela Ramirez and Miriam Nunez. So those are the two riders that are going off the front here for the sprint, but B Pink just dragging this gap back.
The peloton didn't want to let these two riders go. It's really interesting, actually. You don't see that happen very often when two teammates can just get off the front like that and hold a bit of a gap. They did really well to hold it, but unfortunately for them, it's been quickly closed down, but it has strung the peloton out. Look at this. There's a big difference in what the peloton looked like before when it was all bunched up. It looks like it is coming back together now up this small drag, but it's really good to see riders taking the race into their own hands, being aggressive and going for opportunities, because in bike racing you just never know what's going to happen. You can predict it, but I love how unpredictable cycling is. So fair play to those two girls. What a great thing to try as well. Why not? Two teammates attack. If you get a gap, you've got each other to help you out.
Definitely. Just a little shout out to John Molyneux as well, watching us, and he's just saying, of course, road racing has its roots in cobbles and gravel. So far this year, so many races, and he's listed them all. Thanks for your input over on Facebook. Thanks, Dave Chanel. We'll feed your information back as well for that one. Beverly Franz checking in from Canada. So thanks for all your comments already. Don't forget, as we said, if we do get a race blackout, as the organisers and the host broadcaster have said they will do, we will come back to us and then we'll have a little bit of entertainment. You've got the opportunity to ask Danny. So you've got Danny here. You can pick her brains. She's an Olympic champion, world champion, super coach as well. So make sure you get your questions in. We can get some chat going. We've got the live chat as well, so I can take your questions as we go through as well on that one. So make sure you get that one in. Gemma Lynn, thanks for checking in as well. Austin Wells just asking, where's Trek Sega Freda? They're on the ladies tour of Norway. And it gets difficult, doesn't it, for teams sometimes to split the program. You can just see it as from a team point of view, it can be a logistical nightmare, can't it? Having one team here in America, one team in Europe on the world tour. Yeah, and unfortunately, we just don't have the strength and depth throughout the women's teams yet
to really field the strongest teams in both races when there is a split program. We are definitely seeing an increase, and I love to rave about how positive, you know, female cycling's going, and just to be able to commentate on this race is fantastic. But at the moment, that's why you're not seeing teams like Trek Segafredo here. They are in Norway, which we've just commentated on, another super race, and the only team to actually do a split program is the Canyon SRAM team here.
Yeah, and I was in touch with Beth Doria, their PR manager, before this one as well. We're starting to get a few little attacks in, and again, she was saying, you know, from the point of view of getting some bits and pieces of information back from the team, they've got different sort of logistics going on this one. So we're seeing now next attack going in. It's the Fearless Femme colours that are on the attack. Rachel Langdon, it looks like that. Yep, that is going on the attack here. Number 115. Rachel Langdon, she's from Kentucky. Good. I love how they're giving us everywhere where they're from, and for her, it's quite unusual as well. You see the on this one, the gel just stuck up the leg of your shorts. Kind of maybe got caught when the hammer went down on that one.
Yeah, a lot of riders have got kind of individual preferences in terms of where they put their gels. A lot of riders will wear shorts and jersey and put their gels in their back pocket, but sometimes riders will opt for the skin suit, and what happens there is there's actually less pocket space, so they'll have to tuck their gels under their shorts, and also it's a little bit easier to get hold of when it's just kind of in your shorts. You can just grab it and go.
Clara Honsinger there, they're just giving us a little view there of Clara Honsinger. For you fans of Lux Flexenschaft, I think hopefully I'm pronouncing that sponsor right. Now the Shoair 2020 team up towards the front, B Pink as well. The B Pink team, Tatiana Guderzo, they've brought here former world champion Vanya Canvelli, Chiara Perini, Katia Ragusa and Silvia Valsecchi. B Pink, good to see B Pink here as well. And Tatiana Guderzo could be a good bet today, can she?
Yeah, she does. She always pulls one out the bag. You know, she'll have a terrible year and then all of a sudden she'll do a really good result. She's been World Road Race Champion in 2009. She was second in 2004, third in 2018, and she's also picked up a bronze medal in the 2008 Olympics. So she's such an experienced rider. So she'll be in the right place at the right time, and I'm sure if she's got form, she'll be great in all the terrains in this tour. And it's Sabalinskaya back on the front. As I mentioned earlier today, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of her. She loves just to be here, to be in control of the bike race at the front. She knows she can get through it with a bit of a shorter stage than normal for women's bike racing, under the 100 kilometres. Under the 100 kilometre mark. She's only got 45.9 miles to go, and she thinks she can control it all the way. So it'll be interesting to see how she goes when they really kick up on these climbs.
I think Tatiana Guderzo, we're seeing her up towards the front as well for V Pink. So they've been very animated in this one. Have Team V Pink, and their riders, the Alp riders at the back. So just seeing them in their pink and blue colours. A lot of you asking for Aisha McGowan, who I just think is we're just seeing on the left. But they got Claudia Bering, Rachel Plessing, Corey Popovic, and we've got Christina Vrouwenvelder and Andrea Bettine. It's the Alp Cycles Racing team.
It's really interesting, actually. Gemma Lind just commented on our YouTube Global Cycling Network racing site, saying how wide the roads are, and it's a really good point, actually, because the racing in America is so different to the racing in Europe because of this. The roads are really huge, and it means it's just not quite as aggressive because the riders don't have to fight for position quite as much. It does line out, so you don't want to be caught near the back. But when it comes back together, you can almost have 2, 3, 4 lines maximum across the road and get to the front really quickly. Unlike races in Europe, you know, such as the Tour of Flanders, where, you know, they're a quarter of the size of this road that we're seeing here, and it's super important to be at the front all the time. So you saw Tiffany Cromwell from the Canyon SRAM team at the start line. She was right at the back because she knew that probably within the first mile, if she wanted to, she could get to the front. So a little bit more relaxed, but again, I'm sure the terrain's going to really split this race up.
So good to see the Durango riders up here. There's Veronica Leal, number 122. That's a lot of pre-race chat was about her. There's Zabel and Skyer. Again, just trying to get control over the front of this one. If you are just joining us, welcome aboard. This is the Colorado Classic Stage 1, and starting and finishing in Steamboat Springs, 85.8 kilometers. We have our first Queen of the Mountains, which will come after our intermediate sprint at Sharp Avenue at 33 kilometers covered, 52.8 to go. The Peckham Lane at 35.7, 50.1 kilometers to go is the Queen of the Mountains point, the first one of those. Then Big Valley Ranch, which comes at 16.9 kilometers to go. Could be significant. Do you think 16.9 though still too far out from the finish to be decisive?
No, I don't think so, because obviously you've got the descent, so depending on their descending skills, that'll be really interesting to see who we see over the top of that climb. And it looks like some of the descent is also gravel, so there's going to be so many different factors that come into this race, and you have to be such an all-rounder in these stage races. You have to be able to climb, you have to be able to deal with gravel sections, you have to be able to descend, because even the best climbers, you usually have to get down the other side. There's limited, stage or race finishes on, summit finishes on the top of mountains, so they have to be able to descend, and that really comes into, your development as a bike rider as well. So I don't think so. I think if it's super aggressive, they could stay away all the way to the finish, because there's actually not much flat section left. By the time they've descended, there'll probably be only 10 kilometers or so to the finish line, which is, great motivation if you are away that it's not too far.
70.5 to go. The attacks going in here. So thanks to input as well. Your tweets, Charity. Thanks to Kiko Flores as well. Thanks for saying hi. And now the moves here. Going in our former national champion. You can see here. So the Durango specialised jerseys coming through towards the front. We definitely need something to just light up the first part of this stage here. Fearless Femme, DNA getting in on the action as well. The US national team getting themselves up there.
And it does like they have got a small gap after this move, so this is a bit of a significant move. I think if they start working together, it doesn't look like many of the riders want to come through and help, which unfortunately will mean it will likely come back together.
So again, this going to take a big move to try and get away on this stage at the moment. So again, just these teams as well, just the little moves, the little testing attacks going in. As Danny said, the wide roads here, it just means that at some points it gets difficult to try and get away.
And that was a really good counter attack there by the rally rider, and that's the most dangerous parts of the bike races. When they become attacking, it's the counter attacks that normally stay away. And here's another one from one of the riders who was away initially with her teammate. So it's going to be relentless, I'm sure, until a group stays away. The riders and the teams are happy with the composition of riders and potentially let them go up the road, and then it's up to the other teams to control it back for their sprinters or climbers if it comes to that towards the end of the stage.
This is the bit that we don't get to see a lot, isn't it? It's the flurry of attacks that you get on the beginning of a stage in order to get that breakaway established, which is a lot of the time there's the sort of interesting part of the race in terms of getting, the for that breakaway to start. That's it's a great part of the day, not for the riders. It's a great part to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And also there's a lot more to it than just, riders getting away and then they get a break. It has to be the right composition. And by composition, I mean the riders are happy that the riders in the break can either win the race for their team, or they've got the strength and depth behind them to be able to control the race, not let the break get out too far and bring it back ready for their sprint finish. So that's why it can take a long time. It can take sometimes up to an hour in a bike race to get that right composition of riders, and sometimes it never happens, and it's just a relentless race. And if it doesn't happen, it's hard for everyone. Sometimes when the break goes away, everyone kind of sits up, then their kind of job's over, then they can just control it.
And now, as we said, the host broadcaster did warn us that this would happen, that the picture will drop out. And the legend who is Sid, who's pushes all the buttons here at GCN Racing, as soon as pictures come back, Sid will go back to pictures, so we will come back. So they did warn us in advance that this could potentially happen. So we have got, remember, hashtag Ask Danny in terms of the hashtag that you can get going here. We'll take live questions as well. So I've got the various forums going on backwards and forward as well. So do excuse me if I look up and back in order to be able to go. Good question from Matt here as well. So we'll throw that one in. How far out do these girls need to start positioning themselves for a sprint versus just kind of kicking back and chilling out? But in that bunch,
I'd say it's all about how technical the finish is. Depends on the terrain of the finish and the weather conditions. If it's windy, if they think it's going to be split up. But if there isn't too much in the sprint finish in terms of the differences in technicality or weather conditions, I'd say normally it starts to heat up with about 10 kilometers to go. Riders are kind of trying to start getting near the front, and then generally if they've only got about 6 riders in a team towards the finish, it'll be a case of using up every rider in that team to drop their sprinter off with about 200 meters to go. So in women's racing, that doesn't normally happen till maybe 4 kilometers to go, 3 kilometers to go, where every rider can then do their job to drop their sprinter off. So you'll get the more powerful riders, the engine riders, the time trial specialists starting off their lead outs, doing a long turn with about 4k to go. And then the last punchiest sprinters, not their pure sprinter, will be the ones that do maybe 30 seconds and really ramp it up to drop their sprinters off, hopefully in the perfect position around 200 meters to go on a flat finish.
Now, we love sprint finishes, don't we? We love it when a breakaway hangs on. We've had some great breakaways hanging on recently. If you've been with us here on GCN Racing at the European Championships, was one of the best breakaways going away to the finish. As a rider, though, you came from the track background, won Olympic title in the team pursuit, world title in the team pursuit. So you were that sort of, I would say, from looking in, you were that rider that any team would look at. They think, Danny Rowe, organise that sprint. In terms of organising that, the lead out, looking at the riders you've got your sprinter, were you the rider that would take it in from sort of 4 kilometres out, because you have a rider that does the big turn, and then as you go down leading out that sprint, you're organising the riders who take shorter and shorter turns on the front, where you've potentially got a sprinter right in front of your sprinter?
Yeah, it actually changed quite a lot for me depending on the dynamic and the team composition that I was in. So when I was riding for Wow Deals last year with Mariana Vos in the team, I was actually towards the end of the lead out. We had some really great time trial specialists in the team. So I was actually left till later on to try and launch in that last few people that were leaving Mariana Vos to sprint with 200 meters to go. So I'd have a real punchy sprint at the end to drop her off in the right position. But I have had situations where I've been that kind of, I guess, engine where, coming from a track background, a specialist of around 3 minutes, I could sort of ramp up the sprint. And I actually preferred that because it meant I was sort of out of trouble for the sprint finish, which can become really carnage at the end. And there's so much pressure to drop off your sprinter in exactly the right position. So, yeah, I guess if I had to decide, I would be the start of the lead out, or the sprinter myself, I guess. But then it's even more pressure to, do the job for the team and finish it off at the end.
When you get into races like this, and stage races in particular, we saw it during the Tour de France with Elia Viviani and the sort of rider that he is, and sprinters and going into the climbs, because then it changes, doesn't it? Because in small teams as we have here, and you have sort of historically in women's cycling, you have to be able to give the gas at the bottom of the climb as well, don't you, for your sprinter? Because you don't have that luxury of having big teams and being able to, we've got 3, 4, 5 riders that are going to take the climber into the climb, and then having the separate lead out train.
Yeah, I think you really have to be an all-rounder as a female cyclist, and you see a lot of the leaders are real all-rounders. There aren't many sort of climb specialist riders out there, because they don't really get their opportunity. You get the Giro and you get the odd 1 or 2 days, especially actually in this race, to have your mountain finishes, your summit climbs of over 10 kilometers, but actually the majority of racing for the women are the punchier climbs, the less than 5 minutes where you have to really power over the climbs and get over them. And like you say, unfortunately, the strength and depth in the women's racing isn't quite there. So you have to be able to do it all. You have to be able to get over these climbs to help your sprinters at the end. And yeah, you've got some super fit girls out there who can just do it all. And you're seeing a lot of riders coming from the track background where you get a lot of technical skills. It's a great place for young riders to start off their cycling careers, and also cyclocross. You're seeing so much now. Gravel being put into these road stages that you have to be able to deal with. You know, even for the likes of Katie Hall, who we're looking at as potential favourite for this race, you know, gravel's not going to suit her on paper, but she has to be able to ride over it. So a lot of the riders are coming from that background or putting some cyclocross into their winter of training to then help them for the road season.
Because we're not getting that luxury, do we? We don't have that in the calendar as well. You know, because on the program we have, I think, races like Strada Bianchi and all these sort of races. And again, because of the size of teams, and we don't have, as teams, you know, they might be able to field a full team in Tour of Norway, but they might only be able to field four riders here. So you, as you just said, you have to be an all-rounder, don't you? You have to be able to climb a bit and sprint a bit, and you know, in order to be able to just be competitive.
Yeah, and also to get a contract. You know, if the DS or team manager are looking at a list of riders, they're going to take someone who can do a multiple of jobs or could win in a lumpier stage and a flat stage, rather than, unfortunately, where on the men's side you can have those key specialists. You don't really see that many all-rounders. You see more of a climber, a stage race rider, a one-day rider. I think you will see that in the future when women's cycling does develop a little further, but for now it's definitely, I guess, the best to be an all-rounder. You're definitely going to win more women's races as a result.
And we've got a good question as well in here from Thomas Burnell. In terms of what gear ratios do you use in women's racing? Is it 53-11 like you would see in the men's peloton, or you know, because it's a valid question. It's something that people are interested in.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And for a race like today, I would say probably not a 53-11, because you have got super steep climbs. So I know in the Giro, when I rode up the Zoncolon, which is a really famous, brutal climb, we had really different gear ratios. So we'd use a compact, so a lot easier gears. I think I even had like a 30, maybe even a 35 on the back. It was huge. But again, the riders will have mechanics, so that will be discussed before the race, especially for teams like Canyon SRAM. Before they even fly to America, they would have had this conversation, sat down with their mechanic, and it will be individual riders' preference as well. Some people like to grind a bigger gear, but especially for these longer climbs, it's definitely beneficial to have more of a compact chain rings on, so you can spin easier up the climbs.
I rode up the Zonklam once. I think I nearly cried by the time I rode up it with Gustav Larsson, Swedish pro, and he did wheelies the whole way up, as only pros would do. We see Sagan wheeling up once. You know how steep the Zonklam is.
Yeah, it's brutal.
I was just breathing out my ears, and he was popping wheelies going all the way up it. So it's a good one. That's quite an interesting point, because you were saying about Canyon SRAM, but logistically for teams it becomes very different, doesn't it? Because when you're out of your sort of standards program, because you don't have the same team trucks, you don't have the same team cars a lot of the time, and then the planning that goes in, especially because the soigneurs, if you're new to cycling, the soigneur is the person that looks after the riders, your carer. They do the bottles, they do the food, they do the massage pre-race and post-race as well, but they have a massive job, don't they? Because you see, whenever you see a team travel, it's all the bikes, it's the big coolers, isn't it, with all the bottles. So it takes a huge amount of sort of logistics to move that team, you know, across to another continent.
Yeah, huge. And the soigneurs really are the unsung heroes of the pelotons, I guess. They do everything. They're up first and they go to bed last at night. Like you said, the bottles, massage. They're also a bit of an agony aunt, you know, when you get on that massage table, if you've had a bad day. It's always the soigneurs that kind of, I guess, need to give us that advice in terms of picking us up or putting us back together again for day 2. But again, onto the logistics, it's really tough because riders in Europe are used to having their trucks, their big team vans, and as I'm sure Canyon SRAM will have in Europe. And here they're probably doing everything out of a smaller van or a truck. So they've really got to be, versatile and, be able to work in all different conditions, and it really will take a lot of planning from the teams.
It was interesting watching the rollout in terms of the teams coming into this one, because as you said, we're seeing a lot of the sort of domestic US teams that are in here, that as we've said, we're seeing a lot of the time for us, and for the first time we don't get full coverage of the Joe Martin stage race, the Tour of the Gila. We get some, we're getting more and more coverage now of Tour of California. But I think for me, what was great to see was especially the South American teams, the Durango team, Swap It, Fearless Femme, going on the attack straight away. Because when you come into a race like this, and you might be a pro team, but you might race only in your home country, you're going up against the teams of Canyon SRAM. Those are your World Tour teams. You can't have any sort of, you've got to just get in and race, haven't you? You can't kind of look up to them too much. They're just there to be shot at.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously you can have respect for other teams, but at the same time not be scared of them. And that was really impressive to see. They've taken the race on and really got stuck in, and really they've got nothing to lose. So that was really nice to see how aggressive they were being. And the Canyon SRAM team actually have got, like I said, more to lose, being that kind of big dog in this race that everyone's going to look up to. So I'd love kind of, I guess, an underdog type team to do really well in this race and then get confidence and build on that in the future to really grow and develop.
Good question from Drunson over on our YouTube. So thanks for your question. Define how thick are the tyres and how compared to the regular tyres. And in terms of tyre choice today, with that gravel in there as well, will that determine what tyres that you use compared to the normal ones?
Yeah, potentially. So on gravel, you'll have a wider tyre, so it gives you more grip, stability, and also tyre pressure. So they might not run as higher pressure if they know they've got the gravel to come. If their tyres are pumped up super hard and they've got thin tyres, as soon as you turn a corner on the gravel, you're likely to just come off. And it's really interesting, actually. I was listening to a podcast I really like, the Zwift Cycling podcast, and they did some interesting chats with some teams who had done a lot of research on tyre pressure. And before, you used to pump your tyres up as hard as you could because you thought that was the quickest rolling resistance on the road, and actually they found out the optimum tyre pressure was actually around 85 psi, which I was amazed at because that's actually quite low.
Yeah, it is compared to normal, isn't it? Question from Austin Wells. So thank you, Austin, for your question. Why do we think track is not as popular in the States, and who is your current favourite track rider on the women's circuit? Thank you, Austin, for that question.
Yeah, good question. It's hard for me to comment on why it's not as popular in the States. I'm not sure about your coverage of track cycling. I think that's the main thing with how popular a sport is, because you can't get that kind of role model riders to look up to. I always think if you can't see it, how can you be it? How can you form these big role models, these dreams of what you want to be if it's not in front of you? And luckily in the UK, a lot of the big races, the World Cups, the Olympics especially, they're really pushed out as role models. A lot of the sponsors in the UK really target track riders because unfortunately for the road side, the track gets a lot more coverage because it is run in parallel with the men. So all the track racing is men and female at the same time. So potentially that's why. And the second question, my favourite
track rider on the, have you got? It's like picking your favourite kid, isn't it?
That's a really hard question. I'm gonna have to go with Laura Kenny. So Laura Trott, as a lot might know her as, in 2012 when I won the team pursuit with her and Joanna Rousel. She's just a super role model to me, obviously 4 Olympic gold medals, and she's just had a baby, actually coming up 2 years ago now, which is incredible. It's gone so fast, but she's still training, racing with so much ambition as usual. So yeah, she's got to be my pick.
Right, again, more questions. So Adre Honibal, my 16-year-old girl has just started to ride mountain bikes. How will I know if she has potential for the Olympics or similar?
And where are you from?
I'm not sure.
Not
where
sure.
Adre Honibal hasn't put where he's from.
Okay. Again, good question. I guess it depends if she's racing in bike races where you can compare her against other riders her age. That's probably the best thing to do. But at 16 as well, I think you've got so much developing to do, and I think that's really important. I didn't start riding until I was 14. I didn't even have a racing bike before that. I was a swimmer and runner before I started cycling, and we had some talent ID coaches from British Cycling come into my school and asked if I wanted to try out. I was in a maths lesson,
wasn't it?
Exactly, maths lesson at the time. So I did it, and it took me a good few years. And I think the great thing with cycling is females develop a lot later. So actually, I probably haven't even hit my prime yet, and I've stopped. So that is a bit of a shame. But what I'm trying to say is I think it's really important that if she's not winning now, it doesn't mean she hasn't got the potential to win at the Olympics. I think at that age, the main thing is that she's enjoying it, because it's too hard to kind of, I guess, have it to be a profession if you don't enjoy it. So
just
make sure she's enjoying it.
Let her have fun, and then the potential might come. You'll see it as soon as you will. Gemma Lynn, good question. So thank you, Gemma, for your question. Would Canyon SRAM have done any special preparation to race in the States since they're used to the European roads?
Yeah, really good question. So it's obviously altitude as well, which makes a massive difference to racing in general. You have lack of oxygen, so you have to be able to race in those conditions. So I think the only preparation they would have done was to potentially come out to this race earlier than usual to get used to it, get used to the potential heat, the dry heat, which I'm hearing is the situation in this race itself. So I know Tiffany Cromwell has been over with Ella Harris, and I think the other riders were already here doing a big training block before this race. So it obviously depends on the whole race calendar. Sometimes you don't have that option to come out early enough because it is super packed. And unfortunately, again, for the women's teams, they don't have a huge number of riders on their roster. So you don't get that luxury. But I think looking at kind of social media, following riders that I know, they have come out here about 10 days to 2 weeks early to try and prepare in as best they can.
And we had 10 days extra in Colorado.
I know.
I've not been here, but it's beautiful. And so Adre's in South Africa. Good place for.
I went on honeymoon in there. One of my favourite places I've ever been to.
Yes, excellent. And Dylan Wynne Jones, thank you, Dylan. Good question. What makes Dutch women so good at cycling? What a great question.
Very good cycling. Very good question. I was obviously on the Dutch team of Wild Deals last year with Marianne Vos, and I think it's just inbred into them, because they are a country that is it's just so set up for cycling. If you go to Holland, there's cycle paths everywhere, segregated lanes. They're all riding to school, they're riding to work, they're out on bikes with their families. It's really part of their culture. When I started cycling, I used to avoid riding on roads that I thought kids were going to be on because I would be taking the piss out of. But for them, it's cool to ride. You know, they're really developed in cycling into a young age. They've got amazing role models to look out for, and they've got the opportunities to race. You can race every day of the week in Holland, and I think the earlier you start racing, the earlier you can be technically good. I'm not saying you have to be super strong physically, but you know how to position yourself, you know how to actually physically ride a bike. And if you look at the Dutch riders, that is what they're so good at. We commentated earlier on the Tour of Norway, and it was a Dutch team that really put the hammer down in the crosswinds and formed a massive echelon that split the peloton in half. And that's what the Brits actually really struggle with, actually the tactics of a bike race. And I think that's why the Dutch are so good. They've done it from such a young age, and the country's set up for bike riding.
And also, as you were saying earlier when we were commentating the Tour of Norway, that a lot of Dutch riders whether that's road or track, they come from speed skating. And you know, I mean, we're in the Colorado Classic, and you know, famous Americans like Eric Hayden and you know, his sister Beth Hayden, wasn't it? Her name momentarily escaped me, but they came into cycling from speed skating, and the Dutch have a long history of that kind of crossover as well.
Yeah, and it crosses over really, really well. It's obviously a real kind of lower limbed sport, really explosive and still an endurance sport. You need that engine, you need, you know, a strong heart and lungs. And again, it's not even just the physicalities, it's that real kind of, I guess, mental toughness to be in a sport that you learn so much from. You know, I always say how much you can learn from sport, not just being, you know, physically demanding, but learning how to set goals, for example, and you know, just have a structure within your week and things to aim for.
Yeah, so if you are just tuning in, welcome, but this is stage 1 of the Colorado Classic. So we are here, stage from Steamboat Series. We were warned in advance by the host broadcaster that pictures may drop out, and they have. So we're doing an Ask Danny session. So get your questions coming in. So thanks for all your input on. We'll keep taking your questions as soon as pictures come back. We'll go back to pictures, so excuse that us. It's completely out of our control. They do promise us that for the rest of the race there won't be this issue. But thanks for your patience. Thanks for all your questions as well. You've got Olympic and world champion here as well. That you could just throw your questions, anything that you want to ask, and we will do that. A good question as well. You haven't put your name. How do you overcome burnout after competing for so long? So if someone has overtraining and burnout, how can someone come back from that?
Yeah, really good question. I think that's why the off season is so important, and it's really important to just hang your bike up and really have a rest, not just physically, but for the mental side of things as well. But yeah, you see a lot of riders being over raced throughout the season, and they get to this sort of point in the season where they've just raced so much that it's just such a battle to get through, and you're really kind of on eggshells whether you can get through or you end up getting ill. And unfortunately that's when, you know, you are just pushing your body to the limit, and not just on the bike but the travel around the races as well, which really takes so much out of you with time differences, you know, having to travel to airports and to different continents and parts of Europe. It really does take its toll. But I guess to overcome it, you have to have a break. You have to listen to your body and hopefully not get to that stage where you are becoming really over fatigued. I think that's where it becomes a problem, and then you can end up with sort of real problems that can take a lot more than, say, 4 to 5 weeks, which a typical off season would be, to get back into it. But as a bike rider, you learn so much about your body year on year, and you can see those kind of warning signs. For me, I'd get kind of run down, and that was when I'd talk to my coach and try and change my training around. So it takes a lot of experience, but I think writing a training diary out is really important, so you can just see and look back, oh yeah, you know, I picked up this warning sign or that warning sign, so hopefully it doesn't come to the point where you're so over fatigued that it takes more than a few weeks to get it back.
I'm just being told we've got some pictures back. Thank you for your patience. We may well drop out again, so bear with us if that does happen. Thanks for your questions. Keep them coming. We have Adriana Gutierrez from Mexico, who is on the attack. She is wearing number 53. Is the rider that we're going straight back to, and is off the front. And a couple of chasers, so just trying to get onto them. So you've got Emily Newsom from Tibco Silicon Valley Bank. She is the rider who is up here, and the rider here wearing number 53.
Looks like Rachel Langdon as well, number 115, is with her. Just looking back there to see how much gap they've got over the peloton. It looks like 55 seconds. They've got a really good gap now, which is always nice to have over that minute. You know, you've got a really good buffer where hopefully you're not going to be seen, because that makes such a difference. If the peloton can see you behind, which they probably can't do at this stage, you can see now it's a real significant gap. That's great, because then the peloton don't have that kind of carrot to be able to see these two and try and catch them.
So you can see good gap now, 55 seconds. And that's the difficult thing on these really big roads, that they can see you for ages, can't they?
Yeah, exactly. There really is nowhere to hide, and they'll have to try and, work together here and become out of sight. I think the good thing about this stage is it's such a rolling terrain. They can hide, going over those sort of lumps and bumps on the downs here. There's no way the peloton will be able to see them. So they're going to have to, like I say, work together now and try and stay away from this peloton behind.
So Ariadna Gutierrez wearing number 53, so this gap. So we saw Rachel Langdon going on the attack a little bit earlier on, so number 115. So she's, again, she's been very animated throughout the race so far. So Emily Newsom, the Tibco Silicon Valley Bank rider, that's got away as well. So this chasers are working well together. They can they'll be able to see that rider. So we got that the wrong way round there. They put it up, they corrected that. So our two leaders, this is our chaser. So we've come in, so apologies for that. We're just coming straight into pictures with you as well. So this is our chaser trying to get up to our two leaders, who are Newson and Langdon. Ariadna Gutierrez, again, just we haven't got a... This point as well, Danny, when you've got that breakaway and it's established, it's a tough effort, isn't it, trying to get across, especially when the gaps have gone up to almost a minute.
Yeah, it was really, really hard. And you can see the Tibco Valley rider here is not happy with the rider behind. Maybe she's not pulling as much as she feels that she is, and she's trying to get away ahead of this sprint, or maybe she feels that she can go from a long way out to try and get these sprint points. But unfortunately, it looks like number 115, Rachel, is going to pip her for this first sprint point of the day with 200 meters to go.
Rachel Langdon on the attack here, so just now tucking it down. You can see a downhill run into the sprint. So that's the first sprint of the day done. This is our chaser, so trying to get up to our leading group. So 89 riders, you can see, starting the stage. So she's having a good day, Rachel Langdon.
Really good, and it might be a case that this rider will be able to just press on and get across to the two in front now. They might sit up, and after this sprint, that was a real motivation for them to keep going all the way to this sprint point. But it looks like they're still super motivated to keep this move going.
So on to throwing it into this left turn now. So back together, bouncing across the railway tracks as well.
And you can see really how relentless this race is. It's so up and down. There's no flat at all. They've gone down towards that sprint point, and straight away they've turned left and they're going up straight away. So it's really, really, real tough day on the legs of these girls out there today.
So Langdon and Newson climbing here, so the road's starting to go up. These are the gaps. So this is what the race needed, though. It needed a breakaway, didn't it? You could see that Zablonskaya was trying to dictate everything behind. This is the sprint from the group behind, so they're looking to sweep up the minor points on that first intermediate sprint of the day. So then just goes straight on to the first QOM of the day.
And you can see just how steep this climb is now. They've come off that road down below, they've turned left and they've hit this climb, and she's out of the saddle here, really, really grinding what is probably her easiest gear. The rider behind's either got a smaller gear ratio on, she's just able to spin a little bit more up this first steep section of the climb.
Gutierrez trying to latch on to these two riders ahead of her.
She's got them in her sights, which will be a great sign and motivation for her, having that carrot to chase now. And I'm sure we're going to see the peloton sweeping round that left-hand corner and starting this climb.
You see Langdon there, just both these riders now just spinning out of this tempo. The Queen of the Mountains jersey, though, at the top. We got two climbs along the route today in our QOM, but especially for, I would say, Fearless Femme, that sort of team as well. No disrespect to them, but getting a jersey, targeting a jersey, whether that's going for those intermediate sprints, going for the QOM points at the top. It's so important for teams, the smaller teams in this race, to be on the podium every day. It's a huge, it does a huge amount for the teams and sponsors.
Yeah, it does. A huge opportunity to get your sponsors on TV, and that's why you see a lot in races, the smaller teams trying to get into that breakaway. It's their opportunity to really showcase their teams and try and get their jerseys, whether it be in the sprint competition, the QOM, the mountain competition. So for these girls, that's such a great motivation. They're getting up towards the QOM now, and it's also a great situation to be in if you're not an out-and-out climber, because you've got that, I guess, sliding room. They've got that minute nearly advantage into the bottom of this climb that they can then potentially lose and still be in the bike race when they get over the top.
So these two riders, Rachel Langdon and Newson from Tibco's Silicon Valley, they've got one rider chasing behind, and if you were with us earlier and you saw the Reds swap it, a Jolico jersey, and Gutierrez, the rider chasing behind, taking that Pan American Championship road race earlier on in the year. So different jersey for her in that one, so taking that in May, and that was a victory in that one. Similar length to today's stage, actually. That race, she also had a busy season as well. Rode the Tour of California. She's coming into this one off the back of the Tour of Guatemala. Not really had a huge amount of racing since the National Road Championships. 1 kilometre to go now to the summit of this one. So it looks like Emily Newson targeting this Queen of the Mountains competition. Having a little look back at Rachel Langdon. She doesn't want to make the same mistake as that intermediate sprint.
No, definitely not. And you can see this is where it flattens out towards the middle of the climb, and like we just saw, 1k to go, you can really see in the distance it really ramps up, and it's going to get so steep towards the top. And you can see now the difference in climbing abilities between these two riders, and I'm sure this will give her the motivation to really go for this QOM competition.
So Rachel Langdon for Fearless Femme, so they've got a potential winner in this if it came down to a group sprint. But these climbs already, you can see they're serious enough to be able to potentially just thin this peloton right out.
Yeah, and actually we're getting a lot of comments on our GCN Racing Facebook Live saying how big the bunch is and how, it's a really good sign for the US scene. And it's so true. The strength and depth throughout not only the European peloton, but the USA peloton is really increased. And it's just such a positive sign for women's racing that we've got so many riders, so many teams, really striving women's racing forward.
Ariadna Gutierrez just hunting down Emily Newson in front of her. Just, you can see, just setting that tempo from the bottom of the climb. She hasn't, no jumps in terms of, not aggressive in terms of getting across that gap, just setting a steady tempo, focusing on that rider in front of you, just gradually just dragging the race back, dragging yourself back up to the front. So a tough day. So if you are just tuning in, welcome aboard. This is the Colorado Classic, starting and finishing in Steamboat Springs, 85.8 kilometers. The QOM at Peckham Lane is the summit. We will then have the final climb of the day at the Big Valley Ranch. So we'll have off the top of this one, a long descent, and then a few rolling little climbs up towards the final climb of the day, which comes at 16.9 kilometers to go. And then it'll be from that point, if there's no breakaway again, that's got a real substantial gap that they can take all the way to the finish. It's about seeing who of the fast finishers has managed to get themselves over these climbs.
And this really is such a significant climb, so I do think we're going to see the peloton really fractured behind, unless in fact they're going to be waiting for the final climb of the day, the gravel climb that we've mentioned, which comes at 42.8 miles or 68.9 kilometers, which is only, about 15 kilometers to the finish. And you can see now that Emily Newson has made it over the QOM to pick up these points.
Maximum points for the Tibco Silicon Valley rider. So Newson goes over there. Gutierrez was the rider that's right behind her. And that's the QM point. And we're still climbing. That's so cruel, isn't it?
That is really cruel. I questioned myself then whether it was the point or not, or whether it was a 500 meters to go sign. But it did look like it was the line. But she is still climbing. So that is absolutely brutal. I started this day thinking that the sprinters would get over this. And I feel like I want to retract my words here, because this is absolutely savage. We mentioned earlier it's nearly 1,500 meters of elevation throughout this race, and in a race of 85 kilometers, that is really, really significant.
So we're seeing the next group go over. Excuse our pixelization again. This is the host broadcaster, as we said, that's had some issues today. So thank you for your patience. Thanks for sticking with us. Emily Newson here from Team Tibco Silicon Valley Bank, 35 years old. Busy season that Emily Newson's had. That Joe Martin stage race, quite a domestic program, the Tour of the Gila, and they have the Amateur Tour of California as well. So again, as women's cycling grows, hopefully we'll start to see those other races. Then she jumped over to the Thuringen stage race in Germany, finished 16th overall in Thuringen this year, and that's Thuringen as well. If you're not familiar with the women's pro peloton and the race program, Thuringen is one of the top stage races throughout the year. There's a huge amount of prestige in that one as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, and I've ridden the race a few times myself, and it's such a well organised race. A race in Germany, it's 6 days long, and it really has a bit of everything. Some years there's time trials, there's criterium stages, and normally it's very wet. It has gravel in it, it has cobble sections, long climbs, punchy climbs, and it really is one of the best stage races for the women's calendar.
So a lot of, if you get a win there as well, it's a sort of career-defining win sometimes.
Yeah, and it looks like she's just started this descent now, and it's a really nice position to be in on such a fast descent. You know, she's out there on her own. She can follow her own lines. She can really focus on getting down as quickly and as efficiently as possible without worrying about other riders around her, other descending skills. And it looks like she's riding really, really well. She's on her drops. She's trying to get as much aerodynamic gain as possible going down this first major descent of stage one.
So great, and you can just see using every last millimeter of this beautiful wide road here in Colorado. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks. You can see your gap, your leader, Emily Newson. Gutierrez, Langdon is still off the front as well. 55 seconds is still the time gap, so they are controlling the Tibco Silicon Valley riders' advantage. And in terms of the team coming in to this one for Silicon Valley Bank, Brody Chapman's got to be a potential favourite for this race as well. She's had a strong season.
Yeah, for sure. She is one to look out for. A really experienced rider. She's a definite all-rounder, is Brody Chapman. She's raced in Europe. She knows exactly how to race a bike.
So if you're tuning in and you want to know where this is, so Steamboat Springs, and we're located, it's northwest Colorado, so known since 1947 as Ski Town, USA. So Steamboat Springs has an elevation of 6,695 feet. So that's where Steamboat Springs sits. It's a pro cycling race in Colorado style with a route set against the rugged park range of the Colorado Rocky Mountains. This stage sponsored by Smartwool, and the whole race sponsored by the VF Corporation. So big thanks to VF Corporation for coming in and backing this one.
And back to Brody Chapman, she won the Tour of the Gila this year, so she's obviously in fine form, likes racing in America, and she's just come back from Tour of Scotland a couple of weeks ago, where she picked up 38th in general classification, but so different to this race, so you can hardly compare. Scotland was brutal, it rained relentlessly, stage one was actually cancelled because it was so bad, so I'm sure she'll be happy to be back in the sun, which is what she's used to, coming from Australia. So yeah, definitely one of the favourites for this stage race.
Yeah, the weather was like biblical, I think you could call the rain in Scotland on that day. Just to give you some of the jerseys that they're racing for today. So in terms of the general classifications brought to you by the Gates Corporation, we have the Queen of the Mountains, which is sponsored by Colorado Tourism. We have the VF Corporation Best Young Rider jersey, which is green. These will all be awarded at the end of today. Best, you've got the Sprint Leaders jersey, the First Bank Sprint Leaders jersey, we've got the Audi Inspirational jersey, and my particular favourite, the VF Corporation, the Badass jersey, which saying in a British accent doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't.
Especially at my age.
I'm sure a lot of people are laughing at that.
Yeah, badass. Jeremy Powers would be. I need to get Jeremy Powers just to say that and just just say that, and I can just play it when we need to say that one. So yeah, good job. And good question, Austin Wells. Question here as we're out there as well. So as a 122-pound climber, to be 122 pounds, do you think I could be competitive on the track? Excels at climbing and punchy uphill attack, weak on the flats.
Yes, obvious that you excel in climbing, being that light. That is super, super light.
My left leg's that weight.
Yeah, I've not been that weight for probably since I was about 10. But again, could you be competitive on the track? It's a really hard one to say because you do get smaller riders on the track, and it all depends on how much power you can produce. So again, Laura Kenny, using her as an example, a very, very light rider, but she has a large amount of muscle mass and fast twitch muscle fibers that make her good on the track. So it all depends on what your muscle fiber makeup is. If you are a fast twitch fiber type athlete where you can sprint, then that means you could be good on the track. It's not always down to the weight of your body mass. It's down to, again, the fibers that you've got within your muscles, whether they're fast twitch, which would be great for the track, or slow twitch, which would make you a better endurance, long distance athlete, more of an engine type rider, not an explosive rider. So again, maybe worth doing a bit of testing on a watt bike or something if you don't have power on your own bike, just to see what your max sprinting power, your explosiveness is like, to really determine whether you could be a good track rider or not. But very good question.
Yeah, because track, as we always say, it doesn't matter, a track will always help you, whatever height, weight, as Danny says, if you're a climber, you still need to be able to sprint. If you come into the finish and you've done the track, you've grown up, got on the track, you still need to be able to sprint to win a stage at the top of a climb, and getting on the track, even if you don't become Olympic champion or you're world champion, it will help your riding, wasn't it? From a suppleness point of view as well, makes you a great pedaler.
Yeah, totally. And you see a lot of the men who have transitioned from the track. Obviously, Geraint Thomas, who won the Tour de France last year, the Yates brothers, who ride for the Mitchelton Scott team, myself, who transitioned from the track to the road. You have to be able to sprint. There's not many times in a bike race where you win solo. Great if you can, but normally you have to sprint. Even if it's with 1, 2, 3 riders and you're coming into the finish, you have to be able to sprint. So it's actually a part of training that a lot of riders neglect. I'm not a sprinter, so I'm not going to sprint, when actually it can have such a real kind of benefit to your bike racing in general, if you can just increase that max power and be able to sprint. Also in lumpier races, when you're going over short, punchier climbs, if you can have a higher power sort of threshold or max power, it won't have such a detrimental effect on the rest of that race. So it's a really good point. But track racing definitely complements the road, and it's not always about what you weigh, it's about your muscle fibers.
So our leader, the gap now down to 25 seconds. Just to warn you as well that we are being warned that we will probably get some more signal dropouts. So thank you for your patience. Thanks for sticking with us when we do get those dropouts. But we do. It's great that we've been able to see our rider Emily Newson, the host broadcaster. As we said, they came into this. They warned us earlier on that we would get these dropouts. So thanks for sticking with us. 25 seconds, and Hagen's Berman Supermint are the team that are coming through towards the front, and Hagen's Berman Supermint, another US team, Leanne Ganza, Lily Williams, Jess Sarah, Lisa Racketto, Whitney Allison and Lindsay Goldman. So there we've been warned that picture is going to drop out. Thank you for all your patience and your comments. That climb, I've got to say, you know, when you see that climb, as we just said, false summit, QOM, and you're still climbing. I mean, as a rider, you must be in there and you must get to that point, especially if you're not climbing. You'd be like, really?
You learn quickly to put the course into a program like Strava and look what it's actually like, because a lot of the times the road books can lie, and there's a lot more climbing in this race than the road book what it looks like on paper. This looks absolutely relentless. It's up and down all day, and like you said, it was a QOM competition and it kept climbing after.
Yeah, it's like races when you see as well, and you know, you see it all the time, don't you? You've been climbing for 10k, and then they get to the point and they go, oh, this is where we're categorizing the climb from.
Yeah, exactly. So you can already be climbing, and then that's the start of it. So yeah, you really have to do your research, and that can really help. And that's something I actually learned throughout my career on the road, to do a bit of homework before the races, really suss out where the key points of the race were. In this case, obviously the climbs, positioning into climbs if the roads do narrow, gravel sections, which you're going to see later on, hopefully in the race, where positioning is really key. So you know exactly where you are on the road, what's coming up, how long the climbs really are, how steep they really are. So you've just got that added knowledge, you know what's coming, and that's really good for motivation to get through the race as well. If you know that your knowledge is correct, you can motivate yourself to get over. I know there's 1 kilometre to go, 2 kilometres to go. You can really try and break it down.
If you're not a climber as well, you know, there's always that thing as well, as it's, you know, I always used to say it for sprinters, is getting off the front, attacking, and giving yourself a bit of drift room on those climbs as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really important, and it was something I used to do as well. It was so important to be near the front at the start of the climb, especially if it was a shorter climb. These climbs we're seeing are so long that it's almost not worth the climbers trying to hang on for. They will wait to a later part in the stage race where they can have their moment to shine. But if it's a shorter climb and they potentially think they can get to the finish, they will try a thing called having sliding room, where you basically start at the bottom of the climb on the front, and with a peloton of up to 100 riders, that's actually quite a long distance in the roads. They've got the duration of the climb to drift back through the peloton and hope that come the top of the climb, they're still in contention with that last rider to be able to follow down the descent and get back into the group.
Yeah, just a little bit of a gap. Don't forget, you can ask Danny Rose here. You can ask her loads of questions, getting loads of great questions over on the various forums as well. Thank you for checking in as well. Don't forget, subscribe to GCN Racing. We have loads more. We've got the Ladies Tour of Norway live for the next 3 days after this one as well, and the Colorado Classic. We're doubling up on that, but you can ask Danny loads of questions. I just wanted to kind of go back to something that you were talking about earlier in terms of we have the question about coming back from sort of chronic fatigue and that kind of thing. As you now as a coach, and I know you coach some young pro riders, and in terms of how you develop their training program and working within their race program as well, so that they're, as young riders, you know, they're not getting over raced, and monitoring the training, because as a pro athlete, don't you kind of walk that very fine line between absolute peak fitness and just falling off the cliff edge and getting sick.
Yeah, you do, and it's a really key part of coaching and coaching experience, and I'm learning a lot, but I've also learned a lot from being a rider myself. So hopefully I can pass on my expertise to the young riders that I'm now coaching. And I think it's all about seeing where this rider's come from, their goals and ambitions, and really trying to train smart. I think that's the key with young riders. So with our coaching team, Rowan King, we try to utilize shorter amounts of time and get, you know, their efforts done within shorter rides. I think the ideology of racing and training is really changing now from old school, where it's all about, you know, long miles in the winter, building up that base and then making the intensity come closer to the racing itself. But now I think a lot more intense work is done in the winter, and you can really train smart. So we don't have many days where we prescribe our riders to just ride. You know, there's always a reason why they're going out, what their goal is. They're training to that goal. We break down the race. What are the demands of that race, so that we include that within their training program. So when it comes to a race, and if it's like this race that we're commentating on today, they've done climbs or efforts in the duration of the climbs they're going to hit. So it's not a real stress and pressure on their body. And again, rest is so vital. Essentially, when we're training, we're breaking down our muscles, and it's only when we rest that they rebuild stronger. A lot of people think it's all about the training, but actually it's more about the rest. If you don't rest properly, you're not getting the most out of the training that you're doing. So I was a pro rester. I really did not do anything when I wasn't on the bike itself. So
after training, if your parents or your partner comes in and you've smashed through a box set on Netflix, you're like, I'm training for the Olympics.
That's in the training diary. You have to put rest into the diary. I was very adamant about that. But yeah, it's really important, and diet and sleep is another key part of our messages that we put out to all our riders. You know, you can train as hard as you like, but if you haven't got a diet that really backs up the training and the recovery, and you're not sleeping properly, that can have such a huge effect on your fatigue and obviously other life stresses as well. So communication is key with a coach and rider.
And talking about sleep, and we're going, you know, when riders are going across continents, you know, and we saw it with Team Sky with we take the mattresses and the duvets and the pillows and that kind of thing. I mean, is that something someone can do, travel even down the bare minimum, taking your own pillow and that kind of thing? Because as you said, if you go in, you know, on a stage race, and especially in France, it can be a Formula One or a Campanile, which, you know, with the pillows have been there since 1971, and you know, you're trying to get a good night's sleep. But you know, would you advocate things like that for anyone that's even going out to, you know, they've trained for a year to do a sportif or a gravel race or something like that, to get a good night's sleep the night before, and also potentially travel with some of their own food to be able to prepare that?
Definitely. And again, it's not just for the pro riders. You can be so proactive in your preparation for a race, a sportif, or a big event that you're coming to do, cycling or non-cycling. Like you say, with the pillow, for example, it's such a huge, you know, you're used to your own pillow, so why not take it with you? Then you can use it wherever you're traveling, taking snacks on long journeys, so you know you're having, you know, the right food. You're not having to rely on airplane food or picking up from local convenience stores and things like that. This is the stuff that can really make a difference. Earplugs, eye masks. You don't know what hotel you're going to be in. You don't know if it's going to be light or noisy. And these are just the small things that can make such a big difference. And I think because I've come from a British cycling background where it was really drilled into us that marginal gains make such a difference, I could really feel that and see that throughout my cycling career. So if I can pass that bit of knowledge on to other people, then that's great.
It is. It's great. Thanks. Don't forget, keep all your questions coming. I'm seeing quite a few of you are Zwifting while you're watching that, but it kind of brings us on as well. We've got 3 graduates of the Zwift Academy in this race.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Zwift lover myself, especially living in Wales in the winter.
I think one of them was in Wales.
Oh, it's probably raining. Yeah, Zwift is such a great tool, not only if the weather's bad, but you know, there's so many different terrains, workouts that you can do. We, as Rowan King coaching, put a lot of workouts into Zwift, and yeah, watching us is a great way of combining the two. So, yeah, the Zwift Academy winners, we've got 3 in this race today. So we've got Ella Harris, who is the most current Zwift Academy winner. And then last year was Tanya Erath, the German rider who's still in Canyon SRAM. And then Leah Thorvaldsen, who is now riding for a different team. She had 2 years on the Canyon SRAM team, which is what they graduate in when they pass or they win the Zwift Academy competition, which is essentially they run the Zwift Academy. They have workouts through Zwift for a number of weeks that you have to complete. Your weight is inputted, all your different physiology is inputted into Zwift. They run racing, they run different workouts. They can really look into you as a complete rider. And then they actually get you onto the Canyon SRAM winter training camp, which is generally in Mallorca, and see how you ride a bike. Because obviously it's very important that you can ride a bike outside, and then they'll see whether you fit into the team personality wise. And yeah, Ella Harris got that gold ticket this year, and what an opportunity from Zwift to being in one of the best world tour teams in the world, and she's really grasping that opportunity, and I think it's just amazing that Zwift obviously give a lot of riders those opportunities as well. I know the Zwift Academy has just started, just opened up for this year, so I know a lot of the workouts are now on Zwift for you to be able to see and see if you can make it into the Zwift Academy team that they do on the women's and the men's side.
Yeah, let's go. Good luck. Get out there. Right, good question here from Herm Jen. Not sure where you're watching us from. Do we think some of the shorter riders would benefit from bikes designed around 650c wheel sets? Emma Pooley in particular seems to think so.
Yeah, that's a great question, and myself and Emma Pooley actually ride Windy Miller custom bikes, and they've just built Emma a custom bike with a smaller wheel set, and she is absolutely loving it. And I think it's actually crazy that things like that aren't almost taken into consideration when you're racing as a pro. Obviously there's not many women that are kind of around the 5 foot, maybe even under 5 foot, I wouldn't like to guess, with Emma Pooley in terms of how tall or maybe short she is, but I know she's absolutely loving her new bike, and I think she would, or shorter riders would really benefit in a smaller bike setup, just because they can have a bike that fits them properly. They're not overstretched with the frame set. So yeah, to your question, I do think it would really help.
Because the bike reacts differently, doesn't it, underneath you? Because as well, we see with with the kind of growth of kids bikes, don't they? And there's loads of different kids bikes out there now, because there's that difference if you need a smaller frame and to drop the wheel size, it means you're not sitting in between the wheels almost. I mean, you see youngsters growing up and they're kind of the frame sitting in between the wheels. So when you change the whole dynamic of the bike. Do you think it's probably more to do with having a whole team of bikes on the roof of the car and having to have the 650c wheel bike up there as well?
Yeah, exactly, and that has got to be taken into consideration. Obviously there are spare bikes on the roof, and a lot of the time that can be versatile to a lot of different riders in the team. It won't just be one rider that can hop on the spare bike, it'll normally be everyone in that team, and it'll be a case of trying to make it work for maybe the few minutes where the mechanic is fixing your bike or towards the end of a bike race. But if you do have one rider that is particularly shorter than the rest and there's only that one bike on there that will fit them, that's when problems may arise. So that could be another factor of why you don't see it.
Good question as well from Magnus Nussmark in Sweden. So Swedish champion Lisa Norden. Thanks for your question, Magnus. Does not want to be a pro cyclist because of the large difference in the prize money between men and women in pro cycling. In triathlon, it's the same. Is the gap decreasing?
Not really, unfortunately. It's a real shame, and it's a really tough question and situation for the women. It is increasing, and I'm actually really proud to say that the UK are leading the way in terms of the prize money and trying to make it equal with the men. The Prudential Ride London is one that have equalised the prize money for men and women. The women's tour in the UK, the OVO Women's Energy Tour, again, the same as the men, and that's so great to see. The Tour of Yorkshire, another one. So again, it's going to come with the coverage. Unfortunately, without the coverage, the sponsors won't invest in the teams if they're not going to see their businesses, their companies on the shirts of these riders on the telly. So it's almost a snowball effect. As soon as we get that coverage, I think we'll see the pay gap increase. The difference decrease, and there'll be more parity for the women.
Because we also have to get to that point as well. Prize money is great, but we also have to get to that point where every single pro rider in the pro women's peloton is earning a living wage as well. Because again, that's still got quite a way to go, isn't it? There's quite a difference.
Yeah, it's not just prize money. Yeah, I even forgot that myself. It's such a huge difference between men and women. So, for example, there's a minimum wage for the men of around 40,000 euros, and for the women, I'd say, it's really hard to say, but potentially 50% of the women's pro peloton won't even be earning 10,000 euros a year. So it's really tough, and until we see that salary increase as well. You know, you're seeing a lot of the riders, the women, having to have part-time jobs alongside their cycling career, and with better wages, you'll see an increase in the level of women riders who are being able to ride full-time. And then it'll just be a snowball effect from there on, increasing the level of women's racing, the sponsorship, the coverage of teams. But I think it will still take a few years, but we are getting there. So I really like to be positive about women's racing. I saw such a huge difference in my personal cycling career, and it's definitely going in the right direction. You can see it out here today. There's such a huge peloton out here in the USA, and a few hours ago we were commentating on the first stage of the Tour of Norway.
And what a stage it was. If you're out there, and again, it's the return on investment, because when you talk to team sponsors and you talk to anyone that's been involved in sponsorship in women's cycling, and it's only going to increase. I mean, John Johnson, who is someone in the UK who I don't think quite gets enough credit for his vision, because he was part of Johnson's Health Tech and Matrix Fitness, and he sort of recognised, you know, the Tour Series, which I think you won the first one off, I think, in Stoke, didn't you? Is that right? My memory, I've got such a brain full of useless information. But we had the Tour Series, which then in the UK, which then grew, and then Sweet Spot, who run that, started the Ovo Energy Women's Tour. And John Johnson, I remember speaking to, and you know, him saying back probably even 5 years plus ago, getting 10 times return on the investment as a company for being involved in women's cycling. So that's only going to increase. If you're out there and you're seeing this and you're watching it and you like it and you're a company director and you think, do you know what, I'm going to get in there, I would say at the moment the PR alone from just going in and sponsoring a team would more than pay for the return on investment of the sponsorship. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's amazing about women's cycling is you've got so many incredible role models as well. So they're going to be representing, you know, your company, your business in such a positive way as well for young people, for getting more women on bikes. And I think that's really, really important as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you listen and I love all your comments and all your tweets and everything. And I think I was commentating the Ovo Energy Women's Tour as well, and I think it was around the time of the Women's World Cup. And I think the tweet of the year for me that stood out, I just saw it. I can't remember her name, so I apologise because I'm stealing your tweet. But it literally, she said, I've just sat and watched TV with my 8-year-old daughter, and she can't decide whether she wants to play in the World Cup or be the Queen of the Mountains. And that was sort of, that's the impact, isn't it? That's what you want to see.
Yeah, and that is amazing. And that was something that I never had when I was younger. My dad actually competed in 2 Winter Olympics in the sport of biathlon in 84 and 88. So I had that role model in my family, but that's what a lot of girls of my age didn't have. And that is it's just amazing. And I'm so passionate about trying to get more girls into sport in general. And like I said earlier, if you can't see it, how can you be it? How can you have these role models? So that's brilliant. I love that tweet.
That's brilliant. And talking to Lisa Norden, you know, I used to look after Lisa Norden in terms of management, but she was very much, she's just won the road and time trial championships of Sweden. So she's a triathlete, silver medalist at the London 2012 Olympic Games. But, you know, growing up, my daughter, she was very much a role model for my daughter, and she is a phenomenal person and a phenomenal athlete as well. I've got a great picture of my daughter with the silver medal after the Olympic Games. afterwards, just right after she finished. So it's a good one. Just a good question here from Ted Phillips. Thank you, Ted, for your question. Do we think women's only race like the Colorado Classic is better for bringing viewers and thus prize money to women's races than paired with races like the Tour, so La Course, for example?
Really good question, and actually a conversation I've had with a lot of different people, spoken about on podcasts and different radio stations. And my personal opinion is I think it's actually great to have both. I think standalone races are fantastic, and I think we're seeing that the viewing figures are just as high with the standalone women's races, which is great because it means that we're not just kind of piggybacking onto the men's scene. We are creating an audience, a fan base for our own racing as well. But at the same time, I think races like La Course, which is run alongside the men's Tour de France, is such a prestigious race as well, being the Tour de France. It is the most prestigious bike race in the world. My personal opinion is that there shouldn't be a women's Tour de France as such. We shouldn't have to compare ourselves to the men's racing. We are different. But what I do think is great is when the women's races are run alongside the men's one-day races. So your Tour of Flanders, your Flèche Wallonne, your races, your classic races in the early part of the season where all the infrastructure is already put in place. You have got the fans on the side of the road. They can enjoy both races in their own right, but on the same day. That works really well. I think there's a real struggle with stage races on, running them at the same time. You know, a lot of people say, why can't the women start after the men's or before the men's in the Tour de France? But actually, it's really hard to do that. There's been a lot of conversation just with things like hotels, putting the riders up, the whole teams. It's such a circus, the Tour de France. So actually, logistically, it's almost impossible. But you're seeing the likes of the Women's Tour of the UK really setting itself up to be that prestigious race that women need. What I do think is a shame is when the Giro Rosa is run at the same time as the Tour, because then you do see a bit of a split audience. But it is tough because obviously you've got to fit a lot of races in to the calendar. But a great question, thank you.
Yeah, it was a good one. And of course, we've got the Vagada Sweden races that we watched here on GCN Racing last weekend, and the Ladies Tour of Norway, which is on at the moment, which is of course giving way to what I call the Game of Thrones of cycling, which is the Battle of the North, which is coming in 2021. You always feel like you should drop into some like big epic voice when you say the Battle of the North. But I'm excited about that one. That's coming in 2021. If you're just joining us or you're staying with us, this is the Colorado Classic. We're on stage one. We're in Steamboat Springs, but we have been told by the organizer going into this one that we would lose pictures at certain points, and we will come back as soon as we've got pictures. Super Sid in my ears will tell me that we've got pictures, and we will go straight back to them. So thanks for all your questions. Thanks for all your input as well. I think we're having a great conversation. A lot of you comments here. We're just trying to change the world here as well. Having a great conversation. And a good question from Matt over on the chat from, who do we think is going to win the women's road race in Yorkshire this year?
Oh, now
thanks for throwing us under the bus for that one, Matt.
So it's really interesting that the women's race, they go over Lofthouse Climb in Yorkshire, which is a really significant and steep climb. I actually rode the climb in the Tour of Yorkshire last year, which was a 2-day race, similar roads. However, it does come onto a finishing circuit, which is really technical, up and down, relentless. The weather could be bad, which will play into the race, the factor of the race. I know from a British point of view that Lizzie Deignan is out to win this race. She won the World Championships in America a couple of years ago, and she's recently given birth, and she's trying to win the World Championships again on her home roads. She's from Yorkshire, so I know it's probably her biggest goal throughout her whole cycling career. So I think she'll be super tough to beat, but also you cannot count out Marianne Vos. I think if I was going to put my mortgage on who is going to win this bike race, it would be Marianne Vos. She's just looked in a league of her own again this year. It's so good to see her back at her top form. You saw in the Giro with 3 stage wins on similar course finishes to Yorkshire. It's an uphill finish, but a short, powerful sprinters climb finish. So
La Course as well.
Exactly, and it was literally a very similar finish to Yorkshire. So again, I'd love Lizzie to win, but my pick would be Marianne Vos. I think it will be an attritional race. There'll be a small group coming to the finish, and Marianne Vos will win. So you heard it here first.
Yeah, there you go. They have it. Daddy's going to put her mortgage on that one. I think, yeah, Mariano's look. Do you think it comes down to almost, if you're with us with the cyclocross last year on GCN Racing on Facebook, yes, GCN Racing will be putting the cyclocross on YouTube this winter. We saw Mariana doing a much bigger cyclocross program, and it almost looks like she's got that snap back this year. Do you think that might have something to do with it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think she also absolutely loves cyclocross. She's so passionate about bike racing. Every time she wins, she's won so many bike races in her career, but every time she crosses that line, it's like it's her first win. And that's what I love about her. Bike riding is the biggest part of her life. And I think cyclocross is where she started, and she just absolutely loves it. And I think that's such a, important part of your training as well, to have those sort of goals and do those races that you really love to do. And again, going back to the sprint and the punchiness that she has improved on again this year, I do think cyclocross would help that. You have to be so explosive to get over those, muddy climbs, the steep sections. You have to be able to run up the hills. You have to be super, super fit. You have to be able to handle your bike. Sweden last year, you could see she went around that corner so fast. And again, it's bike handling skills that you do develop from cyclocross as well.
Yeah, so ride the track, ride cross, ride the road, just do everything. Ride your mountain bike, get out there, and I'll do you know what? I'm going with Cassia Nuviadoma for the Worlds.
Sorry,
I'm going with Cassia Nuviadoma for the Worlds.
I wouldn't.
No. Okay, that's my one.
A great rider.
Orana van der Breggen, I think, could also defend on this one. So we will be back with pictures as soon as we can. Gemma Lind just saying, does the GCN curse apply to Danny, or does the World Cup? Does it make you? I mean, Danny, you've predicted loads of winners. The GCN curse has passed Danny by. I think it's only if you became a full-time GCN presenter, I think you get cursed with that one.
Yeah. So I was told about this curse when I came in a few weeks ago for the Giro Rosa, and it didn't happen to me. I was picking winners left, right and centre, so maybe it's still here to come, but for now I'm staying away from this curse.
Although Dan did predict that Egan Bernal would win the Tour, so we're kind of hoping that he's ended the GCN curse. Although I would like to take some sort of responsibility for that one, because I predicted Egan Bernal was going to win the Giro, and then he fell off and broke his collarbone. So potentially, you're welcome, Egan. If I hadn't cursed it, if I hadn't given him the GCN curse, then he might have ridden the Giro. So yeah, not that can I take? No, I'm not going to take responsibility for that one. Thanks for all your comments, Luke. Just tuning in, just checking on board. How's the race doing so far? So we had a Olga Zablinskaya, we had a rollout. We had, as we kind of lost pictures, we had a solo attacker, Emily Newson, who had gone over the top of the Queen of the Mountains point at Peckham Lane. And it's a bit of any British TV viewers, Peckham Lane, bit only fools and horses, that one, isn't it? We love that one. Rachel Langdon was also up there as well. Ariadna Gutierrez was off the front, and the gap was just coming back down to sort of 20 odd seconds before we kind of lost pictures on that one. Big Valley Ranch is the next big Queen of the Mountains point at 16.9 kilometers to go. So that is what we have coming up. Drunson, question. What do we think both about the team time trial mixed relay for the Europeans and the Worlds? Will it promote women's racing, although it's mixed? What do you think?
A bit controversial. I'm not sure it's going to work because basically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the men do a lap and then the women do a lap. Yeah. So it's not really mixed. I was hoping it was going to be literally mixed. So, yeah, I'm not sure. It'll be really interesting to see, and I hope it does work just for the sake of cycling in general. But I'm a bit sceptical, and I'm not really sure how it will work, to be honest.
It's a bit like the tempo race in the Omnium on the track, isn't it?
Yeah, and I do think the Dutch are just going to be so dominant, and I'm not sure that's really good for cycling either, if you have one super dominant team, but we'll see. ADO Hikes. Are power meters being used in the race? What's your thoughts on power meters in racing? I loved power. I was a bit of a numbers geek, but I do realise that it's potentially taking a little bit of the unpredictability away from cycling, because it is so controlled with power meters, especially in the men's racing where they can do so much research on things like Grand Tours a year in advance. They can find out the length of the climb, they know how fast they need to get up it, they can work out how much power they need to produce to get up it in that certain time. And that is super controlled, whereas I guess back in the day there were no power meters, no race radios, and it was just more off rider's instinct. But again, I always trained to power, so I knew my kind of limits and thresholds, especially if you're in a break, that you know that I can hold this amount of power for this amount of time and not to go over your threshold, which might then put you in the red and cause you to blow up, and then be caught because you can't keep going at that rate. So a lot of the riders will be using power meters in this race, but it's a very individual I guess situation with how riders use power meters. Some don't even have power on screen, although they'll have the power to then be able to evaluate the results, I guess, with their coaches back at home to see how their powers differ from things they've done in training, whether they're at the form they'd like to be. And I think that's what's really great about it. You can really analyse and see what the demands of these races are, because without that it would be a bit of guesswork.
Good. Alan Hoffman, good question. It seems cyclocross is creating some really great road races and racing. It is, because I like now, especially in men's cycling, that you're seeing being led by Mathieu van der Poel, that he's racing his mountain bike, he's racing cross, he's racing the road, because in women's cycling we've always had that, haven't we? You know, Marianne Vos, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, all racing across everything. But it really is creating a new breed of rider.
Yeah, it is, and I personally absolutely love it. It's really, creating that explosive rider that can be so versatile, and you have to be so super fit to do cyclocross. And I think that's why you're seeing actually the training and the coaching change now for the road riders, because even if you're not doing cyclocross racing, a lot of intensity is now being put into the programs of road riders, because they're having to compete with the riders that are racing cyclocross all winter, and then come the first races, they're at their top form, where a good few years ago people used to go into the first lot of racing on a similar level, having just come out of their base training. So I love it, because I think it's really mixing up the difference in riders, and being able to have riders be at the top of their game in all different disciplines of cycling. It's really exciting.
And I just hope as well, because turning pro on the road, we saw it with Lars Bohm, Zdenek Stybar, probably I'm just chopping off the Z off his name, apologies. Zdenek Stybar, Lars Bohm, riders like this. Mike Turnison as well is another example where getting a big pro World Tour road contract was the bit like the cycling equivalent of getting told to grow up and get a real job, that you weren't allowed to ride cyclocross anymore. But, I think hopefully now we're going to see that point where riders just keep competing in cross, because you can see the sort of, and you'll know as a coach as well, the benefits that cross gives you. And you can see, with the boy Mathieu van der Poel sprints, and I loved his comment the other day when he went for the long sprint in the Arctic race of Norway, and it was like, why do sprinters always wait so long? But I think hopefully they'll stick with cyclocross through their career now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as nothing else, it's a great intense training hour and a half, whatever the cyclocross race might be, that actually it's easier to motivate yourself to do a race, rather than go out there on your own or get on the turbo and do as intense session. I think you can push yourself that much harder with a number on your back. And then obviously the cyclocross circuit in its own right is absolutely phenomenal. Cyclocross World Championships is definitely one race that I'd love to go to spectate at. It's such a spectator friendly sport, cyclocross. It's great for the sponsors, it's great for the riders in the winter, and we're seeing it really develop. Unfortunately not as much in this country, but again in Holland, Belgium,
the US,
incredible. And the US, obviously they start with, I know a lot of the cyclocross series start in America. Vos was going out there herself after the season to race, and I know she absolutely loves it.
Yeah, and Jeremy Powers will be with me all winter again for cyclocross here on GCN. So, yeah, we're still waiting for pictures. Apologies, this is the Colorado Classic. We are here. Hope you're enjoying the little chat that Danny and I are having here. I know you're loving all your questions as well. Keep your questions coming. Austin Wales is back. It's got a mounted time trial coming up for that one. Looks the Mount Graham Championships coming up on that one. So, yeah. Good luck on that one. So if you've got any racing or training advice, Danny's here. You can ask her on that. We've got races to come. We've got the Queen of the Mountains point and the gravel road that is ahead of the riders in this one as well. So keep your questions coming. You seem to be getting the Facebook one working better than me, so I keep flicking backwards and forwards. If you've posted any questions on Facebook again, for some reason I'm struggling to get the comments on that one. So yeah, there's lots more to come in this one. As soon as we get some more live pictures, we will go back to that. But again, we see, we saw the likes of when we got the rollout a little bit earlier on. You were commenting on the wide roads and the difference between the US and Europe. Does it make a real massive difference to you as a rider when you're in there and you do have to do that?
It makes more of a difference to the American riders when they come over to Europe. It's such a huge baptism of fire going from the big wide roads to the small roads in Belgium and Holland, which have got massive gaps in the middle of them, the cobbled sections, the fight for position. And I think initially that is why the Americans do really struggle. And we saw it ourselves, actually, the British riders. We were used to racing less aggressive riding, but obviously it was easier for us to go over and race in the likes of Holland and Belgium. But when the Americans do come over, it is a huge baptism of fire because there's just not that fight for position, which makes such a difference in bike racing. But what I loved about the American racing was that it was more, I guess, a level playing field in terms of actual ability on the bike. So physically how good you are on the bike, rather than was it because you just positioned yourself well into that climb that meant that you were able to get over it. I think, in the American racing, because you don't see that as much because there's wider roads, the strongest will win these bike races.
Good question as well, Alan Hoffman. Good questions. Keep your questions coming, Alan. Liking your questions. Do most pro teams have men's and women's teams? We're getting there, aren't we? We're getting more and more.
Yeah, we are. And a lot of them do now. So off the top of my head, you've got the Trek Segafredo team, which is the first year this year. What was Wow Deals last year has now merged with CCC Live. That's another team. You're going to have to help me here.
We also have the teams that are out there as well. So we've got Trek Segafredo, Mitchelton Scott, CCC Live. Movistar is another new one
FDJ.
As well. FDJ, Nouvelle Aquitaine. There's some of the other teams that have got men's and women's teams. The Mitchelton Scott team that is now was kind of one of the pioneers of combining the two projects, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And, I think that the teams are just noticing how they can benefit from having these women's teams run alongside the men's. And it's great for the women who come into an environment where they get to share the resources of the men's, because what we saw before was that the women didn't have a team van, a team bus. They were almost in really small campers. They didn't have the infrastructure, the budgets, but by combining the two, it means that they just get a little bit more help, a little bit better structure in terms of sharing the sponsors. They get the bike sponsors and things like that. So I think we will see it go that way. Year upon year, there'll be more teams running alongside men's. I'm just waiting for Team Ineos to have a women's team. So
Sunweb are the other one, aren't they? Sunweb are also in there as well.
But they were leading the way as well. So.
Yeah, so they've done a great job. Again, you look at that. If you're coming in as a sponsor and the way and now with the sponsorship dollars are so, and so the details are so minute. If you're getting publicity with the men's team, publicity with the women's team, you're getting publicity on the track, you're getting publicity in cyclocross, you've got publicity in mountain biking. That's a win-win for all, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really, really huge. They can get their sponsors or team jerseys all all over the disciplines of cycling and all over the year, you know, like you said, the cyclocross in the winter, the track in the winter, the road in the summer. And yeah, it just, I guess, blows my mind a little bit that a team like Team Ineos don't have a women's team, and we've got a question asking why. I think that is, and unfortunately I think it's because they're not really that bothered, and unfortunately potentially not super passionate about women's racing. But hopefully they will see, you know, that there is a huge fan base, that women's racing is just as exciting, if not more exciting, than the men's, and it will happen in the future.
Sam Cohen, thank you for your questioners there. We jumped in on that one as well. So good question. A few of you asking as well, the ladies tour of Norway in the US, are the rights issues and that kind of thing. So if that wasn't there, then double check on that one. There might be a broadcaster in the US on that one. Rights in cycling is always one that we do question. So if you are just jumping in, this is the Colorado Classic. It's a bit of a Q&A with Danny at the moment. It's a bit of a chat between us. We're waiting for pictures to come back. The host broadcaster said something that is completely out of our control. They're struggling with their pictures in Colorado. So they are promising that for the stages to come, that we're going to have better pictures on the stages to come. So as soon as we get pictures, Sid will tell me in my ears, and we will go straight back to pictures. We did see, luckily, the intermediate sprint and the first QOM of the day. So lots of action going on. It is a bit of a mixed bag today, this stage, isn't it? If we could bring it back to the race in terms of the riders that we're looking at. So looking at those climbs so far, you know, if we go back, I think we're going to go back, gravel climb, you know, going to see some sprinters trying to get up the road to try and give themselves a bit as we were calling it earlier, a bit of drift room.
Drift room, yeah, exactly. And I think it will actually come down to a bunch sprint today. I'll call it. Hopefully I don't have the GCN curse, but we will see. Just before we lost pictures of the race, you saw the peloton getting over the first QOM, and that was a more significant climb looking at the road book than the second, which is closer to the finish. So I think you can kind of look at that and then predict that this will be a day for the sprinters, but they do have that gravel climb to get over, and obviously having gravel on the road makes it, you know, it is tougher, you know, there's a harder rolling resistance to have gravel under your tyres, as well as obviously the terrain itself. So I'm really hoping that we will get the pictures back, because I think it will be a super exciting finale to this bike race.
And then you've got the whole puncture thing, haven't you? So then logistically, as a team, you know, when you're planning the day as a team, you're thinking, right, I'm going to put some team helpers, and we saw it again in Vårgårda at the weekend in Sweden on the gravel sections, just putting team helpers with wheels and that kind of thing throughout the gravel as well, just in case the team car can't get to you.
Yeah, and what you'll usually have as well is teammates riding really closely together. They would have had the chat before the race, and if their team leader does puncture, you know, you'll know beforehand if unfortunately you're that rider that needs to give them your wheel. If you're unfortunately not set to be likely to win this bike race, and your leader potentially is, then if they puncture, you'll have to stop and give them your wheel. So a lot of these different team tactics will happen before the race, and someone like Tiffany Cromwell, she would be a rider to make sure that her leader is at the right place just before that gravel section. So I'm sure if we do get the pictures back just before the gravel, then you'll definitely see that happening.
It's probably, if people see as well, you get coming into bike racing and watching bike racing, and it might be something that maybe it's a little bit of an alien thought, but it's once you've done your job, whether that's on the front, do your big turn on the front, or it's giving your teammate a wheel, it's just knocking the pressure off and pedaling into the finish and just losing time, isn't it? Because some people might think, well, why don't you just jump into the peloton and try and stay with the peloton? But that's all energy and all power that you might need come another day to help your leader.
Yeah, definitely. And you are seeing that more now in women's racing. Unfortunately, again, going back a couple of years, even if you had a job in the bike race, because there were so many limited spots in terms of getting a team for the following year, and you needed these UCI points to be up there in, you know, the riders to get the contracts first. You did see a lot of riders maybe not quite working as hard as they maybe should be for a teammate, because they still had in the back of their mind that they needed a contract as well, which I totally understand. But now I think you're seeing a lot more like the men do. If you've got a job, you do that job and then you sit up. You don't see anyone then trying to fight for 20th, 30th position in a race. If your job is to, set your sprinter up at 1k to go, you would lose minutes if you've actually done your job properly, because it would mean that you are totally gassed at that point and you can't really pedal anymore. So yeah, it's really good to see that real collaboration between the women's teams, the real teamwork, and coming into the race with a real plan and goal, and knowing that actually this stage race isn't for me in terms of GC. My job is to just put my leader in the right place at the right time, and then be really proud that you've done your job to the best of your ability.
Because the flip side of that is also, I come into this from a director sportif point of view, and I'm really privileged that I've been a director sportif in pro women's cycling as well. But having those riders that do that job, and especially sort of advising young riders and thinking, do you know what, if you lose, it doesn't matter if you lose, as long as you finish within the time limit. It doesn't matter if you lose 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, because then it can play to your advantage, can't it? Because if you then get into a breakaway on another day, if you're 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes down on general classification, it's that potential. They go, well, they're no danger, we can let them go.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another opportunity. Like you say, if they have lost time, then if they're in a break, that peloton's not going to try and catch them, and they might have the opportunity to get a stage win. So yeah, it's all about, I guess, education as well when young racers start riding, and to have that really good team ethos within the teams, that it just matters how well you do your job, not where you come in the race if you had a team role. And that was what I really felt on the last team that I was in with Marianne Vos. If you did your team job really well, you'd get a pat on the back, just as the winner might, because I think a lot of people don't realise how much of a team sport cycling actually is. Riders can't win on their own, they have to have a team around them. Even though you only pedal your bike, yeah, you can't win on your own. It's totally team orientated.
And the thing about Mariana, it's like every time she wins, it's the joy. It's the same joy that she won when, I'm sure, 400 races ago, I think I've managed to count out 400 times. And you still have that same joy. Good question here from Anne Daly. Thanks for your question, Anne. And I think I'm getting this right. Longevity in men's and women's cycling, and I think you mean in terms of career, because we've got riders. We've got Olga Zobelinskaya in here, who's in her 40s. We've got Edvig Patel in those 52, who's bit legendary in women's cycling. But I think that's what Anne means in terms of that longevity of men's cycling compared to women's cycling.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I guess it is all down to kind of individual circumstance, because I think what's great with cycling is that you can be absolutely world class at a really young age. We're seeing that with a lot of young riders now. Actually, Lorena Wiebes, who won the first stage of Tour of Norway, is only 21 years old, and she is absolutely in the prime in terms of her performances. She's won multiple races this year, but then also, again, as a female cyclist, you don't actually hit your prime until your late 20s, early 30s in terms of your physiology. So again, I think it's all down to kind of personal circumstance in terms of when you started cycling, and then I guess now there's definitely more opportunity to have a family and come back to cycling, which is absolutely amazing. For me personally, I'd almost felt like I'd achieved everything that I ever dreamt of in cycling. So I've stopped at the age of 28, but I started cycling from 14 and took it super seriously. So 14 years for me was enough. So I think that's what's great about cycling. You can be good at 20, you can be good at 35, 40. Annemiek van Vleuten is absolutely dominating in her kind of, I guess, field of courses out there, like she did in the Giro. And she's an older rider, so I think it's great that you can be good from a young age to an older age in cycling, which you don't see for a lot of different sports. And then again, on the men's side, I think you do see riders peaking a little bit later compared to other sports, but again, usually with, I guess, family circumstances, you see the riders going on for longer into potentially their early 40s. A rider like Jens Voigt, was one that was around a long time, and you can still be super competitive, or an amazing domestique. So yeah, a lot of different things that you can throw into the mix in terms of longevity for men and women, but you can do it for years and years and years
I suppose
if
it's
you
a
want to.
motivation thing as well. As long as you're motivated to
Yeah.
still get up and train every day, if your health is still good, you know you haven't had too many injuries. If you can still get out of bed in the middle of winter and it's snowing outside or it's raining outside, you know that plays a big part as well.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, that was what I guess I wasn't willing to do. So my last race was the World Championships in September, and I went full time when I was 18. So I had 10 years of full time bike riding, and it wasn't the training that was hard for me. It was I guess the mental side of things in terms of I was an all or nothing kind of person. So if I had 3 hours, I had to do 3 hours, and if it said 2:55 on the clock, I'd be out there doing laps around my house. But I couldn't think of anything else. You know, I was really thinking about being on my feet for too long, what I was eating, what time I was going to bed, and that was what I guess was really taking its toll over just the training. I love the training. I'm still riding my bike now, keeping super fit. I love exercise, but I guess it was everything else that went with it, and then weighing up how happy I was with what I had achieved and leaving cycling in a really good mental place, still loving the sport, being passionate about the sport rather than being forced out potentially with injury or a crash, not making a team or having a contract for the previous year and then hating the sight of the bike. So yeah, it's just a fantastic sport, and as long as you love it, then you can ride your bike forever.
We all love it. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Colorado Classic. We're still waiting for pictures to come back. This is something that we can't control here on GCN Racing, and we thank you for for staying with us and all your great questions, and you know, all picking Danny's brains, having a great chat here. There's one thing that we could do is chat for hours and hours and hours. But yeah, thank you for that. As soon as you get pictures, they will be back. So thank you for your patience. Thanks for sticking with us as well on that. Good question from Jojo Adiemi. What do we think about the difference in length of men's and women's races? That's the $50 billion question in terms of race distances. But we're seeing women's race distances go up, and they are controlled, aren't they, by the UCI as well? But we're also seeing men's race distances come down. In the Vuelta, we have a stage of just 94k, which basically just goes up a mountain, down, up another mountain, down, and then up another mountain. So we're kind of seeing would you say, almost a coming together in some ways?
Yeah, I guess so. But I've got a really, I guess, personal opinion on this, and I might be agreed with or not agreed with. But in my personal opinion, I love the shorter racing. I think 100 miles, 160 kilometres is enough. And I think that's why I love women's racing so much, because it is a bit shorter than the men's. It's so aggressive and unpredictable. And unfortunately, sometimes in the men's racing, if it's a race of over 200 kilometres and it is a more flat stage, it's so predictable. A break gets away, the break gets caught, and the sprinters sprint. And yeah, again, it's a tough one. I think bringing the men's stages down is a really good thing, and lengthening the women's slightly, great. But I don't think, again, we need to compare ourselves to the men. We can race in our own right. We're different species than the guys. Again, I always say I don't think we should have a 3-week women's Tour de France. And I just love the unpredictability, the aggressiveness of women's racing. So I think keep the racing around 160k, and I think even if you shorten the men's racing, you would see more aggression and less predictability. I think it was last year in the Tour de France, and they had that almost 100-kilometre stage, a sort of crit stage, and they were all so scared about it, and you're seeing all the GC riders lining up and really worried about it because they just didn't know what was going to happen. So I think that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just a good question here from Drunson. Let us know where you're watching us from. To Dan, a good question again. To Danny as a coach, how do you prepare a rider mostly mentally to potentially spend most of his or her career as a domestique or a lead-out man or woman? That's a good question.
To start with, yeah, really good question. I think I'd never encourage someone to just be a domestique. That'll be my first kind of, I guess, conversation with a rider, especially if they're a young rider. I don't think you should pigeonhole yourself into that domestique role straight away. I'd always try and give my riders real aspirations to win bike races, because I think there's a bike race out there for everyone. But if so, there's some riders that are really, really happy in being a domestique. They love that role in helping someone else, and they actually get more of, I guess, satisfaction out of being, I guess, a helper, a domestique, than having that pressure on their shoulders to win a bike race as well. So I think in terms of mentally preparing, it's just the same as if you were going to win a bike race. It's about, you know, being satisfied with the job you've done and giving it your absolute best, and then being proud of whatever that might be. So yeah, again, I guess that's how I would face it, you know, breaking down the roles of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to improve on as a rider to do their job the best way that they can. But I'd never, I guess, just let a rider come to me and say, I'm happy being a domestique, unless they absolutely love that. If they were questioning their rider ability and putting themselves into that domestique role, I would question that. But if they love that and that's what they want to do, then I'd encourage that and really support that, and try and I guess be positive and do the best role they can.
But you've got to be a winner to get a pro contract, haven't you? You've got to win races. You've got to win bike races to actually get that pro contract. I'm hearing we're getting pictures back very, very soon. But yeah, and you do see it, don't you? Riders that go into certain teams. And I always say, you know, when they go in and they settle into a domestique role, it's almost like the fire gets poured on that aspiration of winning. So we're back with pictures. Thank you for bearing with us. So we are back with pictures as soon as we get an idea of the state of play. Brodie Chapman, it looks like, is on the front. Omar Shapira is definitely in this group as well. So we'll just give a full rundown as soon as we can of the makeup of this group. There's Brodie Chapman is right there. They're showing the gap up there. So Chloe Dygert, they're saying, is the leader. 14 chasers. This group that we've got in this one will go up and down the group here, and as soon as we can give you the full makeup of this group, we will.
It looks like we've been over the gravel climb by now, and we are into the last 7.2 miles of the bike race. And if I wasn't on Chloe Dygert's team, I would not be happy with knowing she was out there on her own, knowing how strong she is in this kind of, you know, terrain. Now it's coming into the more flatter roads. She's coming from a track background, an absolute star, and definitely one to look out for in the future. Coached by the legend Kristen Armstrong. So she's got, you know, a good coach in her ear telling her what to do in these sort of situations, and a strong chase group behind her.
So Katie Hall we're seeing in there as well. So we'll give you that full rundown of rider. Lauren Stevens is the rider right here on the back. So Lauren Stevens wearing number 42. Omar Shapira is the rider not far from the front there. There's Ella Harris. Ella Harris is wearing 23. So good to see Ella Harris up there as well. So Ella Harris wearing for Canyon SRAM. She's in there as well. The rally cycling rider, we've got Crystal Dobell Hickok is in there as well for the rally UHC team. But Chloe Dygert, she was a rider. Did you predict Chloe Dygert was going to win the stage?
Yep.
Honestly, so those of you that were wondering about the GCN curse, it's not there. Arthur Galsby, thank you on the chat forum on YouTube. Is we're just the QOM just put that up. I was just trying to find it on Twitter before they gave us that one. But Chloe Dygert took that one from Marcela Prieto, Flavia Oliveira, Maddie Ward, and Omar Shapira was the makeup of that group over the top of that one.
Chloe Dygert won the Pan American Games individual time trial earlier this year by 1 minute and 15 seconds to second place. So she will be in her element right now with only 9.9 kilometers to go. She'll be able to be in her rhythm. And like I was saying before, in terms of a power meter, if Chloe Dygert's got one on her bike, this is where it becomes really, really beneficial. She'll know what she can sustain for this amount of time, and she'll be holding it as much as she can around that number, trying to keep this group of riders behind her all the way to the line.
So Flavia Oliveira is the fearless femme rider in there. So we said coming into this one it was going to be a bit of a mixed bag, didn't we, in terms of, you know, a sprinter that could potentially get themselves over the top of a climb and get away, and Chloe Dygert, you know, is doing just that.
Yeah, and it does look like in this group behind it is the majority of the climbers that we spoke about before. This is Oma Shapira from the Canyon SRAM team, a two-time national champion for the Israel. Katie Hall, as we mentioned, a climber, a super climber. There she is with the orange helmet just going over your screen now. So I'm sure that was a really aggressive climb. Christelle Doble Hickok, who I rode with, I know she is a super climber. Ella Harris, the Zwift Academy winner of last year, getting herself into that Canyon SRAM team of number 23 there on the back of this small group. So super strong riders, but actually Chloe will be more suited to this terrain now they've come over the climb than the climbers themselves. So I'm still going to keep it out there of my pick of the day being Chloe Dygert, who I did actually say at the beginning of this race. So
you're going to keep rubbing that in, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So she's from Indiana, a place I know well. Spent a great summer racing in Indiana when I was a lad. Long time ago, back when everything was in black and white. But Chloe Dygert here for 2020. You can see this team, as Danny said, with Kristen Armstrong behind there as well. Big part of that program going into the Olympics next year. 5.1 miles to go down on the drops. There's a lot for, in terms of the research that you've done over the years and been involved with, the chat between what's most aero on the bike, sat on the drops like this or up on the tops on the hoods.
Yeah, definitely on the drops, and you can see she's got such a fantastic position on the bike. Not only is her back flat, you know, she's keeping her head down. That is the biggest wind factor, your head. So we were always told on the track to try and get our head out of the wind. You can see her here looking down, probably at her power meter as well, and knowing that she needs to get her head out of the wind. You can see she's got such a fantastic pedalling style as well. As you'll see in this group behind, just splitting up as well. A lot of action happening here at the back with this Tibco rider, and Oma Shapira from Canyon SRAM getting straight onto this, not wanting her to get away. You can see, unfortunately, with a group of this size behind, sometimes it lacks in that collaboration because a lot of riders can hide at the back. So you see, you know, a difference between a group of maybe 4 or 5 riders that can just turn equally to a group of this size, where it's actually more beneficial for riders to try and attack out of it, like we just saw there.
It's almost too cumbersome, this group, isn't it? It's almost too big in a way, this group at the moment. That's Justine Barrow that's in there for the Lux Flex and Schul team.
Yeah, and you can see back to Chloe's style coming up to the 5 kilometers to go mark. Now she's going to be in her track element. I know when I first started riding on the road and I saw the 5k to go mark, 4k to go, 3k to go, I was thinking, right, 12 laps of the track, 16 laps of the track, 20 laps of the track, and you really do kind of try and, yeah, liken it to what you've got left on the track. So I wonder if that is going through her head. But you could see a super strong upper body, not much movement. She'll have a lot of strength and conditioning in her program. You can see how strong she looks as a bike rider, and a lot of strength and conditioning is now into a lot of the road riders programs as well as the track riders. There's been a lot of evidence now to show that, you know, your gym programs can really benefit your road riding itself. I know my brother-in-law Luke Rowe, who rides for Team Ineos, had a really bad crash, and it meant he had to follow a gym program through last winter, 2 winters ago, sorry, and he believed that was the difference between him coming back as a stronger bike rider. So this will be something that Chloe does, I'm sure, at least twice a week within her training program to kind of keep that max power very much present to help her speed on the track and also benefit on the road.
So go back to this chasing group. Good to see the American national champions, not national champions, American national team, rather the US national team colours in there of Katie Hall and this group. So we'll give you what we've got so far. So we're in here, we've got, from what I can make out, Brodie Chapman and Lauren Stevens from Tibco, Krista Doble-Hickok from Raleigh, Ella Harris from Canyon SRAM, Whitney Allison from Hagen's Berman Supermint, Marcella Prieto from Swapit, Katie Hall from the US national team, Flavia Oliveira from Fearless Femme, Justine Barrow from Lux, Annette Barrera also from Swapit, and Oma Shapiro from Canyon SRAM. Is that about right, would you say?
Yeah, I think that was spot on, and you could see there Oma Shapira trying again to attack, and it looks like they've probably had this conversation with the Canyon SRAM team that Oma Shapira is going to try and do all the work, and Ella Harris is just going to sit back. Maybe she's confident that she could win the sprint out of this group of riders.
And now a little boo from Lauren Stevens from the back here from Team Kipco, Silicon Valley Bank. Oma Shapiro can't react. Katie Hall is going to have to do the reaction, but looking at this shot, we haven't got any time gaps up there, but big gap. There's no one in sight here at the moment.
No one behind them, that's for sure, but it's whether they can catch Chloe or have got Chloe in their sights, because as we were saying before, if you've got that carrot, it makes such a difference to be able to really motivate this group to see, you know, we can do this, we can work together. But actually now they're just attacking each other, and you can see Chloe Dygert looking back here, hoping that these riders aren't going to come into view. But I'd actually still back her for the sprint if she hasn't worked too hard. Unfortunately, we didn't see when this move was made. But, you know, if she was in this group behind, I'd back her for the sprint as well. So I think she's going to have to weigh up what she does here. If she can see this small group of riders quite close behind her, what she might do is sit up, back herself for the sprint so she can recover in time, rather than, I guess, risking it on the line to then keep going and potentially be caught.
Chloe Dygert, again, when you look through her career, she's only 22, she's going into the Olympics next year, but multiple national champion on the road and time trial, junior world champion as well back in 2015, road and time trial in that one. Team Pursuit world champion in 2016 in that one, so that was in London. I was there for that one. That was good. Blew my hearing, that one. 116 decibels it was that night, I think, for the Team Pursuit that night between the USA when they won that one. Then world champion Team Pursuit and the individual pursuit that she's won as well. So multiple titles. But again, phenomenal season that she is having on the road. And that crossover as well. So Joe Martin, 2 stages GC in that, Tour of the Healer, 2 stages of the GC in that one. Krona, Kristen Armstrong, Pan American Games in that time trial, as you said. So again, phenomenal season. But she seems to be sort of, again, making that transition from the track to the road potentially, or now would you say this is the point at the end of this year when she'll switch back into that Team Pursuit program and that Olympic track program?
Yeah, for sure. I think the track will definitely be her #1 focus, but I think she uses this racing as part of her training as well, and to potentially pick up some great results, which we all know help with morale, to keep you really motivated to keep training hard, you know, along the way, and really break up, I guess, that track, you know, training where it can be, yeah, quite tough at times. You've got 4 track sessions a week, a couple of gym sessions, and if you're in a bit of an endurance block, why not get involved with races in your own country that you could potentially win a stage of, which is what she's coming to hopefully do now. She's in her element now, coming up to 1 kilometre to go, 4 laps of the track. I'm sure that'll be going through her head to try and take this first stage of the Colorado Classic.
Oma Shapiro behind in this chasing group. So on the front, Oma Shapiro, she's got Ella Harris, her teammate in this group as well. Katie Hall in the colours of the US national team. Brodie Chapman and Lauren Stevens in there for Tibco. Silicon Valley Bank, Krista Doble-Hickok in there for Raleigh. Ella Harris, Whitney Allison, Marcella Prieto, Flavia Oliveira, Justine Barrow, Annette Barrera. They're in there, but you can see the stage is going to go to Chloe Dygert from Show Air 2020, and what a great performance for this. But again, looking at this course, when you get and the way she's riding, she's giving herself a buffer for those stages to come. As you said, we've got some pretty big mountains to come here in the Colorado Classic. But of course, the winner today gets the leader's jersey.
Yeah, exactly. And what a way to start tomorrow, even if you're not, you know, super confident that you will get over that big climb that we can see in tomorrow's profile. It does give you a really good buffer to potentially hang on. You never know. She could get over it. We'll have to look at the steepness of severity of the climb. I know it's a long one, but she's coming into 300 meters to go now, and I'm hoping that she's going to take this victory today.
She is. Again, you've got to push that time all the way to the line, 200 meters. She turns now. She's going to head in towards the finish. This is your winner today, Chloe Dygert. What a ride. We didn't get to see her go, but a phenomenal performance here. She is putting time into some really big names in that chasing group behind her. She takes stage 1 here of the Colorado Classic and will pull on that leader's jersey. Where is that group behind? Here they come. You can see everyone now working all of the attacks that were going in before the run-in. They're now behind him, but it's now down to this sprint. Whitney Allison now makes her move, and the reaction comes. So remember, there's plenty of other jerseys to fight for in this one. So they swing around here, and they will line up for the finish. So the Hagens-Berman Supermint rider lines it up for this final corner. Whitney Allison now will kick it out of this one. Great move. Great final attack by her. Brody Chapman just trying to come up, but it's second place for Hagens-Berman Supermint. Third place there for Team Tibco Silicon Valley Bank. And there's your winner. What a ride. We didn't get to see a lot of it, but what a ride. That is a phenomenal performance.
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing. When we did get the pictures of Chloe Dygert, you could see she was really, you know, head down, committing all the way to the finish. It did look tough out there, but she's done it, and that is, you know, what a victory from the Show Air 2020 team. You know, they'll be going to bed happy riders, and that gives you extra watts for day 2 for sure.
Yeah, what a phenomenal rider. They've had a good day as well in the breakaways and the groups. Marcella Prieto, there's the group. There's some more riders coming in. So these groups behind, it'll give you an idea of just how much this split on this one. Just getting a little bit of a cooling down here as well. And there's Katie Hall. She'll be satisfied with this. She's the rider that everyone will be talking about in terms of the mountains to come and the climbs to come. That's where she really makes the difference.
Yeah, I think Katie Hall will have that down as a really successful stage 1. She stayed out of trouble. She hasn't lost time to any of her, you know, I guess climbing rivals within this stage race, and there was only a small group there, so I think the winner will come from that group behind for the overall GC. So again, we can see Katie just warming down. She's staying on her bike, spinning out. So I think, yeah, a good start for Katie Hall, the winner of last year's race.
Yeah, last year, so it was Katie Hall from Leah Thomas from Abby Mickey. That was your top 3. Great day as well for Hagens-Berman Supermint. One of their team philosophy is win a race every week, which I like.
Oh, I do like that. A lot of pressure, but I like their positivity.
Yeah, no pressure there in that one. So it seems to be having a bit of an issue with her hip at the end of this one.
Yeah, it does. I wonder if she had a crash or something in the gravel section, or yeah, it does look like she's got a bit of a sore hip. Something for a Swanee or potential physio to look at, potentially.
You've got to get cleaned up for the podium as well, haven't you?
Yeah, so I think she potentially did crash, and that's what she's trying to do now, actually. She's trying to clean off the gravel marks or whatever it might be on her shorts that might be covering up those key sponsors that want to be seen on the podium, to make sure that she's up there to show them off proudly.
Her British teammate, Emma Grant, there.
Yeah, nice to see her, you know, patting the back of Chloe Dygert there. It's a real kind of, like I said before, team effort, these races, so...
Here's the rest of the next group coming in. So a lot of these teams will be satisfied with the makeup of that leading group. They've put their big name riders in that leading group, and that was a tough day out there.
Yeah, rider does look like they've worked hard, and I can't believe how much the peloton has been fragmented over that second climb today. We saw just as the pictures dropped out, they went over the first QM and they were all together apart from a couple of lone leaders at the front. Then unfortunately we lost the pictures, and then when we got them back it looks like there's riders everywhere.
Was Chloe Diger on her own. This is the good shot of the finish here. So as we said, tomorrow's stage. So we do thank you for sticking with us, and you did some wonderful questions. I think you got some. I think we kind of put the world to rights a little bit. So thank you all for all your patience. Thank you for sticking with us here on GCN Racing through the loss of pictures. We are promised tomorrow it will be better in terms of the stage getting pictures. It's the Avon stage brought to you by, I think it's First Bank. Tomorrow is tomorrow's stage. And it could, again, it would be a day that riders will be looking to, the sorts of Katie Hall potentially looking to try and take some time back.
For sure. And Hamburger Cyclist on the GCN Racing YouTube channel has asked, is tomorrow another race? Yes, it is. Stage 2, like we were just saying then, a massive climb to be seen, and hopefully a lot more pictures, so make sure you come and join us again. And
Ladies Tour Norway tomorrow, we will be back tomorrow afternoon, so tune in for that one. So doubling up here. It takes a few espressos to be this bouncy throughout the day. We will be bringing you the GC, the general classification, and stay with us for that one. I think they're going to give us the top 5 in the general classification. So riders still coming in. There you have it. There is your unofficial, as it always is, general classification. So Chloe Duggar open for Show Air 2020. So 2 hours and 19 minutes of racing. Whitney Allison at 44 seconds. Brody Chapman at 45. Marcella Prieto at 45. And Lauren Stevens at 46. A few different jerseys there to the actual team jerseys on the graphic. That's a good time. That's a decent buffer. They're going to have to work seriously hard to get rid of Chloe Diger on stages to come, aren't they, with that sort of advantage? Yeah,
that is a big significant time gap. So Chloe Diger had a super first stage there, and you can see the climbers will be out in force to get rid of her tomorrow, I'm sure.
So the Gates Corporation general classification in that one. I just want to see who gets the badass jersey today. So again, apologies for my dreadful British accent on saying badass, but you know, I'll get Jeremy Powers to record it tomorrow. But that's you know, we'll do our best on that one tomorrow. And yeah, keep all your comments coming. If you've got any questions, anything you think of between now and tomorrow, whether it's for Tour of Norway or the Colorado Classic, I'm at Marty Mac TV and at Danny King 1. Is it Danny King 1? Danny King 1 on Twitter, Danny Rowe 1 on Instagram. I was Danny King. I have now married into the Rowe name, but have yet to update my Twitter name. So I'm at Marty Mac TV on everything, so you can get me on that. I should sort myself out with my social media handles, but you'll find me, I'm sure. You can. So yeah, if there's anything you think of, anything you want to, bring up tomorrow, keep in touch. Send us a little tweet. It looks like they're going to take a while to get things finished off, and here we are. What a day! That was great. It was what we got to see in the end. It was a great stage, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a really great stage. Unfortunately, couldn't see the gravel climb, which I was really looking forward to, but we definitely put the word to right. We answered a lot of your questions. Hopefully, it was very insightful. But what a ride from Chloe Diger! Yeah, they're gonna really be pushing it to try and get that one back. Tomorrow's stage again, it's got a big climb on it tomorrow, so they'll be looking to try. But she looked phenomenal out there, and that's a big time gap on a 4-day stage race, isn't it? Yeah, it is a big time gap. But today's, although they were hard, they were more punchier climbs. Tomorrow looks like a 10-kilometre climb. So I think if I was a climber, which I'm not and haven't ever been, then I would be thinking,
we need to go at the bottom of this climb to try and get rid of her and to try and put as much time into her as possible. So the likes of Katie Hall, Oma Shapiro from the Canyon SRAM team will be going for it. So it's going to be an exciting day.
Different between, again, your Katie Hall kind of climber, explosive climber who can make those little short, sharp efforts. For Chloe Dygert, who comes from a track background, she's a time trialist. It's a different style of climbing, isn't it? So she's just got to not panic at all if the climbers just start going and just sit there and grind it out.
Yeah, she really can't try and follow those small climbers that can go on these climbs forever. You know, she's got to settle into her rhythm, into her threshold. And, you know, these track riders are super fit. I know we did still do a lot of road training within our track program, so there's no reason why she can't. She's clearly very mentally strong and likes being in that kind of time trial environment. So I think for her, she'll have to hit that climb, get into her rhythm, and hope that the gap isn't too big to the likes of Katie Hall, who I'm sure will be rubbing her hands together ahead of tomorrow.
Well, thank you to you all. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for all your chat. We have a great community feel going here on GCN Racing. We had it on Facebook in the cyclocross all winter, and it's great to see that's already happening here on our racing channel. We will be back tomorrow. Thanks for all your fun and input. Thanks to Danny for answering all of your questions. From Danny Rowe, me, Martin McDonald. Bye for now.
Bye.